Hello and welcome to the Real World. My name's Cameron. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Real World YouTube channel. If you're a movie fan, if you know of movie fans, this channel is for you. I've got a huge physical media collection. We're always talking about different types of films. And so be sure to join us on our journey here. Check out other playlists on the channel as well. We've got something for everyone here. So give us a like, that helps a lot. Hit the subscribe button as well and get the notifications by clicking the bell below. That way you're notified of all the videos that we do here at the Real World YouTube channel. Today, episode 22 of the Real World podcast, we're talking about defending bad movies. So this should be a really interesting discussion, unique from anything that we've done before. Joining me, this is Bert. How you doing, man?
Hey Cam, I'm great. How's it going today?
Doing well, doing well. Thanks for joining us again. This was a great idea that Bert had that we wanted to dive into. Everyone disagrees on movies, right? I'm sure we've all
Mhm.
experienced this before. You thought that movie was good? What? What are you talking about? So that's what this episode is all about. It's going to be a really fun discussion. And so let's get started. All right, before we jump into our main discussion on this episode, we wanted to talk about some movie news that dropped this week. So first up, the first movie news item that we wanted to discuss is a trailer for a movie that Bert, you sent me this one. I wasn't even really aware of this. It's called Confess Fletch. And Fletch is, I guess, an ongoing franchise, kind of. I guess there've been a couple movies already.
Way
Um,
back, yeah.
yeah, and so
80s, early 90s, yeah.
they're kind of rebooting it now, I guess. And we have John Hamm in the title role. I was liking this trailer. I don't, like I said, don't know anything about this franchise. I've heard of it. I've never seen any of the movies.
Really? Okay.
No, yeah,
Okay.
I haven't. So I'm very curious. And this movie looks really funny. And it looks like it's an kind of intriguing mystery. I guess he's sort of like a private detective somewhat. And so, yeah, it looks like a lot of fun. I'd like to check it out. What did you think?
Well, I'm a pretty big fan of both Fletches that
Okay.
came out. And the problem is for people that are familiar with Fletch, they're going to be expecting sort of the wiseacre, the original movies. He has all these different disguises, and he's really sarcastic and really funny.
Okay.
And I mean, it's Chevy Chase, playing the
Right.
original part.
Right.
And you really should check them out. I'd be interested in
Okay.
what you think
Yeah.
because I think most people that saw those back in the day think they're just, well, especially the first one, it's just like a legendary movie. I mean, it's one of my favorite comedies of all time.
Okay.
And so
Great.
this remake comes after decades of speculation about it being made, and Jason Lee for a while was supposedly going to do it,
Oh,
and
okay.
then Ryan Reynolds maybe
Oh,
doing
okay.
his Deadpoolish character. I don't know if he ever actually agreed to it. I don't think he did.
Right.
And then so finally we get this,
Yeah.
which doesn't at all seem like the same kind of way that the first two were made. I mean,
Okay.
it doesn't have to be like the first two. It's just that I think most fans of the first two I mean, Chevy he's such a smartass, and he breaks the law a lot,
Okay.
and I mean, he's an investigative journalist, so he does kind of some shady things,
Right.
and he's really against authority and things like that.
Right.
So I
Sure.
don't know. To me, it
Yeah.
looked like I have to at least check it out, but
Yeah.
I have
Right.
very low expectations because I don't know, man. It looked it just did not look like the same kind of deal,
Gotcha. Okay.
yeah, Fletch is too iconic. And I'm not going to say that they couldn't remake it because I think with the right casting, it could be good.
Yeah.
I think about Jason Sudeikis and the newer Vacation
Oh,
film. I mean, that was decent, that movie.
okay.
I don't think it's as good as the original Vacation movies, but I thought it was okay. I wasn't like, well, he's not as good as Chevy Chase. So it's not like that.
Right. Right.
But they've got a big hill to climb. Let's just say that.
Yeah. Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's a good perspective to get because yeah, like I said, I have no experience with it. I would love to watch them, especially after the high praise you just gave it. So yeah, I want to check it out. One thing that I found out is this is actually already in theaters. It's in
And
a
streaming, isn't it?
and
Isn't it
streaming.
both?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's so weird. Again, we
it is
talked a
weird.
little bit
Yeah.
last week about how these things happen now. It's just like,
Right.
here's the movie, like it's out, here's the trailer, and you can go watch it, the whole thing right now if you want.
We just finished the trailer and the movie at the same
Right.
time.
Exactly. It's bizarre. But yeah, yeah, I'm curious about it. I'm curious
John
about it.
Hamm's not even like known as a comedian. I mean, Chevy Chase started on, Saturday Night Live and
Right.
comedies well before Fletch and was well
Sure.
established in that type of thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe this is going to be more of a drama or
Okay.
comedy, or
Okay.
just sort of
Yeah.
a more traditional comedy. It almost
Right.
reminded me of a comedy from years ago.
Hmm.
It just seemed like kind of a sort of a watered down
Okay. Right.
version of Fletch. Like it's not
Yeah.
going to be edgy. Like Fletch was kind
Okay.
of edgy. I
I
feel like it's
gotcha.
hard to
Right.
explain,
Right.
but
Sure.
yeah,
Okay. Well, interesting. Well, we'll have to check it out and report back maybe and see if we end up
that sounds
liking
like
it
a
or
good
not.
plan. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Another trailer that dropped, quite a few of these dropped this week, it's called Knock at the Cabin. So this is the new M. Night Shyamalan film, and it's coming out in February. Vert is ready for this, if you can't tell.
Yeah. I'm
We're
always
both,
excited about his films. I mean, I'm often disappointed, but I'm often
yeah.
thrilled,
Sure. That's the thing is it's hit or miss sometimes, with him.
Yeah.
I would say most of his films. I would say that there's, maybe three or four that I'm not a huge fan of, but
Mm,
all the other stuff he's done, I am a really big fan of. So I'm interested. The trailer looks good. It looks creepy,
hmm
looks like he's definitely going that horror route that he's kind of gotten back to in recent years. And I think
Yeah.
Dave Batista looks great in this. He's getting to play a really different kind of character than we've seen him play before. He's kind of
Yeah.
played a lot of funnier roles and, big tough guy roles. This looks like something totally unique for him.
Yeah. I don't think it's the Guardians of the Galaxy coming to knock on that door.
Right, exactly. Definitely not. Definitely not. Yeah. So I'm intrigued. I'll definitely be watching it and see what it's all about. They don't give us a ton here. It's
Right.
just kind of a tease for what the story is going to be.
hmm
So yeah, what were your thoughts on it?
Yeah. Every time it's an M. Night film, I'm like, oh, that looks like a great premise. His premises are always really good.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they're immediately horribly executed, I feel like, when I
Right.
go to watch them. And it's so
Right.
frustrating. But the
Yeah.
fact is, I'm so glad that he makes movies, because I'd say about 1 out of 3 are brilliant
Yeah.
to me, because most of them I tend to not like.
Okay.
Uh, but I mean, there's some that are just okay too, like
Yeah.
Split and those movies.
Right.
Unbreakable, I think those are okay. But I mean, yeah, I'm definitely gonna tune into this as soon as I can, just like I did with Old.
Yeah.
But Old, I mean, just it was just so frustrating
I
because it was
know.
such a great another and I
I
thought,
know.
oh, this is gonna be another one of his great ones,
Right.
and I was just very disappointed in it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for me, Old fell apart at the end. The third act really is where they dropped the
oh
ball
yeah,
big time. The,
yeah,
the ending just totally fell flat for me.
that
Up until
too.
that point, I
Yeah,
really enjoyed it, and they were dealing with a lot of
yeah,
great themes, I thought, and
sure,
I liked the performances. But
right.
yeah, that one was a bit of a disappointment.
I wonder if I feel like M. Night sometimes gets too caught up in his own explanations of what's going
Yep.
on. And sometimes, like one film I'm going to talk about today, he doesn't fall for that trap of that he lays for himself, and
Right.
he just gives us normal exposition.
Yeah.
And but then other times it's like, why is this movie going here? Not to
Yeah.
get too much into it, but
Right. Yeah. It feels like he
that's
has to
one of the problems.
over-explain. Yeah. I
Yeah,
agree.
yeah,
That was my issue with Old is that it just or
yep,
like beating you over the head with here's what this whole thing is. We're like,
right,
okay, we don't need to know all this. It's not
yep,
necessary. So
exactly.
yeah, we'll have to see what he does with Knock at the Cabin when it comes out
Yeah,
in February.
looks good.
Last trailer that dropped actually during this big event, they dropped a couple of trailers. Netflix has this event called Tudum, which they kind
Oh,
of promote all their upcoming movies and shows and everything. Enola Holmes 2 was one that's coming out that I know you haven't seen the original. So,
right.
but that one's coming out soon. They dropped a trailer for that. And then the other one that I wanted to talk about was Heart of Stone.
hmm
And this is sort of a spy thriller action film. Gal Gadot is in it, our Wonder Woman. So I'm always curious to see what she does next. And this looks fun. I think it looks like a cool action movie. I don't know, Netflix, that's another one they're kind of like hit or miss. Who's involved, who's behind it, kind of has a lot to do with, whether it turns out great. We had The Gray Man this year, which we both enjoyed, but
hmm
this is one we'll just have to wait and see. But from the trailer, I think it looks like we got another cool action movie.
Yeah, and it was one of those that it's clearly way far in advance or advance of the release, because as you saw, it's almost like a little bit of behind the scenes, like
Yeah,
they showed like the
interviews.
green screen and that kind of
Right,
thing.
sure.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I did like what they said about trying to make it authentic,
Hmm.
like an action film that's grounded, and
Right.
that's usually the better way to go,
Yeah.
in my book.
Sure,
So it does
sure.
look pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's good. They've got some talent in there, and so yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, that one should be fun. Last bit of movie news I wanted to discuss, not a trailer, but they announced that a new Cloverfield movie is in development.
Ooh.
And so they have a director on board. I haven't seen anything that he's done. He's a newcomer, but he is developing this movie. His name is Babak Anvaro, and so he's going to be developing it with J.J. Abrams, of course, producing
Oh, good.
again. And
Uh-huh.
so no idea what the story is. They haven't revealed any details, but it's going to
Hmm.
be in that world of those
Yeah,
Cloverfield
yeah.
movies. So have you seen all three Cloverfields?
Wait, what's the third one? I've seen obviously the 2008 one,
Right.
and then the
And
one where
then
they're in the basement. I saw it on an
right.
airplane though. I need to watch that again because I kind of forget most of it. That was
Yeah,
pretty good
10,
though.
10 Cloverfield Lane. And then they did the
What
Cloverfield Paradox on Netflix. That's the
I
one
think
on
I
the
saw it
space
and didn't like
station.
it. Yeah, I don't think I liked it.
Yeah, I
It was
didn't, I
kind of
wasn't a big
bad.
fan.
I think I
Yeah,
completely forgot it after I watched it because
I
I
know.
do remember now, and I think I was like, "Oh, this is not good."
Yeah, it came and went. It was one of
Yeah,
those that yeah, it didn't turn out that great.
wasn't
So
like the other quality of the first two.
exactly, exactly. And one thing that's interesting about the Cloverfield, I'm a huge fan of the first two. I think,
Yeah,
and you
I
said
love the first one.
you like the
Oh
first
yeah,
one.
I saw it
Second one
twice
you
in the
need to
theater.
rewatch. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Right. So I'm a huge fan of both. I think they're both
Okay.
excellent,
Yeah.
very unique stories, that just
Hmm.
kind of are very loosely connected.
Yeah.
And I think that's a cool idea. I
Yeah.
think that's a
Yeah.
way to bring in, you know, new young directors like this,
Hmm.
giving them, if they have a cool idea and saying,
Yeah.
let's set this in the Cloverfield world. We can kind of
Right.
loosely connect
Right.
it and,
Yeah.
it'll be tied in and it's part of a franchise. People are more likely to go see it,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. So that's what I think is smart about this kind of series of films.
Yeah.
So I'm always looking forward to it. Anything that they want to do in this world. But I think part of the problem with Cloverfield Paradox was that it was like, let's do a cool, kind of sci-fi horror movie on a space station, and then they're like, okay, but let's tie it in. And the way they tied it in to me just didn't work. I could
Mm.
kind of tell what was added on, and it felt disjointed. All
Yeah.
the stuff on the space station I thought was kind of cool, and then they would do other things kind of down on Earth that I felt was just really strange.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I agree.
yeah, so hopefully this one doesn't do that. Hopefully this
Hmm.
one they tie it in a unique way. I
Yeah.
remember watching the commentary for the original Cloverfield movie.
Oh.
Matt Reeves was the director, and he was talking about
Hmm.
how there's a scene where it's all found footage. So our
Yeah.
characters run into another group of characters on a bridge. It's a very brief moment, but they're
Hmm.
both filming. He's filming someone
Oh.
else who is filming him,
Oh
and
yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
like that could be a sequel, get someone else's perspective on the same events,
I'd like that.
and do that kind of an idea. So
That'd
I've
be
always thought that
cool.
would be a cool way to go into a sequel.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's
Yeah.
what they're going to do here or not, but we'll have to wait and see.
A little steadier on the cam, I would prefer.
Right.
But again, I did see it twice in the theater. It
Yeah,
was just a great experience,
it totally is. Totally puts
'cause
you
it's
in their
crazy.
shoes.
It's a
Yeah,
crazy movie.
it is. It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoy that one. All right. Well, that's it for movie news. So now we're going to jump into our main topic. All right, so as I said earlier, our topic this week is defending bad movies. So all of us have these movies that we enjoy greatly that a lot of other people don't. And so that's kind of what our discussion is going to be about today. Bert's got some movies, I've got some movies that have very low ratings on whether it be Rotten Tomatoes or Letterboxd or IMDb. Critics kind of tore these movies apart. Maybe audiences didn't even enjoy them as much as we did. And so we wanted to kind of discuss what makes a movie good or bad, the whole kind of subjectivity of film. We kind of just wanted to discuss these types of topics before we actually jumped into discussing the movies themselves. So, Bert, what did you have to say about this?
I've always said for every film that exists, there's people that love it and people that hate it.
Right.
And then there's always that film that is one of the best films of all time. And then you hear someone talking about it and they hated it, and you're thinking, how is that possible? Right.
Right.
So that's part of what, generates this discussion.
Sure.
Music you can hear, paintings you can see, but film, it's very layered because
Mm.
you get all different elements combined. So there's so much to it. And therefore, I think there's a lot more to appreciate, analyze, criticize. And really, what makes a film terrible? What makes a film great? Is it just consensus? I mean, what what is it exactly?
Sure.
I feel like
Sure.
that's what we're trying to figure out, just kind of exploring that topic a little bit here.
Yeah.
And even with consensus, it's going to leave out, quite a big section of the population, right?
Yep.
Because that
Exactly.
doesn't mean that you agree with the consensus.
Yep.
Roger Ebert wrote the book. He's got a book called The Great Movies, and he's got
Mm.
a book. He had several books, but another
Sure.
one was called Your Movie Sucks. And I haven't read the book. I mean, he just goes
Yeah.
through several movies, I'm sure, in the book.
Right.
I'll mention Ebert and what he says about a couple of the films that we're going to talk about here today.
Uh-huh.
But the question is just, is there any objectively bad or objectively great film? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's goes back to the whole idea of movies being subjective, like all art is. From my point of view, yeah, I don't think anyone can deny that my favorite movie we've talked about before, Raiders of the Lost Ark, is a great movie. But I'm sure there are people out there who say, no, I really didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't think it was good. So yeah, there's all kinds of different ways we can measure what makes a movie good or bad technically. I think there
Right.
are ways to see like, cinematography comes to mind instantly because I think for me, movies primarily are visual storytelling.
Right.
So can I tell what's going on? that's
Right.
maybe
Can
that's
you
maybe
follow it?
one
Yeah.
thing. Am I tracking the action? Can I
Mm-hmm.
tell, what's going on just by the visuals?
Yeah.
That's one element for me that is primary when it
Yeah.
comes to filmmaking is you have to have that camera on something that we can tell what's going on and you're
Right.
telling a story that way. So
Right.
maybe that would be one. I think another thing would be performance. So and that goes onto the side of both acting and directing.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes a little more complicated because I feel like when you're
Yeah.
getting into the more artistic side, I
Yeah.
guess, whereas cinematography is it's artistic, but it's technical as well. That's where you're getting into more. Well, for me, that performance, was emotional and I was gripping. For
Mm-hmm.
someone else, they didn't feel it for whatever reason. There was a disconnect. That's another element that's where it starts to get murky. I feel like,
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
um,
you got people that say, oh, that actor was overacting,
right,
and I was watching something recently that the actors, I think it was one of these movies. Someone was commenting on about, oh, they were overacting, and I thought about it, and I thought, yeah, but I didn't get that impression.
right.
So it is just a lot of it is just subjective.
Totally agree. Yeah,
Um,
it's totally true because yeah, what makes a movie good? Um, for me it's is the story well told.
mhm.
And again, that's the visual element. As we mentioned, music is another element. Effects and editing, and there's so much, like you mentioned, that goes into it that you could criticize or not. I think editing is another thing that's a little more technical, so you can tell
Right.
like, oh, that was really choppy the way they edited it together. It
Yeah.
didn't make
Yeah.
sense. I didn't
Right.
understand it. And so,
But see, but again, like the editing. I mean, I complained the other day about a movie that was just edited. Oh, it was the Baz Luhrmann film,
Elvis.
Elvis.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just like the edits were so tight,
Yeah.
just like abrupt. But maybe
Right.
some people are like, oh yeah, that was totally awesome. The way it just kept cutting around and just kept
Right.
just like all over. Like some people probably liked that.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. It's a stylistic choice, a stylistic
Yeah.
decision that's going to land with some people and others it won't.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's another subjective thing. So I think to ultimately answer your question, I would say no, there's no real way to
Yeah.
measure whether a movie is good or bad objectively. Um,
Yeah. I think
because we're all so different. We have different experiences, different
yeah.
tastes.
Right. Yeah, everybody brings something different to the table.
Correct.
In their understanding of it. I will say, speaking of technical things, like I've said before, when I saw The Dark Knight Rises, for some reason, with the mix that I heard in the theater. I mean, it was surround sound, it was a, opening weekend probably kind of thing. And I could not understand the dialogue of Bane
Oh,
like a lot of the time.
right. Sure.
And and then there were times where and I'm criticizing my favorite director basically, but there were times where the music was so loud, and it's great music too, but it was so loud I couldn't catch some of the dialogue. And I read articles in which Christopher Nolan said, well, that was on purpose. We're not necessarily, it wasn't necessarily an accident. Like sometimes we wanted to crank up the music, and if you can't hear every word, oh well. And
Right.
so, but to me,
Yeah.
it took away from the experience, because I
Yeah.
do want to hear what they're saying. That annoyed
Right.
me that I couldn't. So
Right. Yeah. Nolan,
still wasn't a
I've
bad movie, but
sure, sure. No, I've actually read because I've heard this criticism before, and I haven't personally
yeah,
really experienced it.
really, okay.
Maybe a little bit on Tenet.
Oh
But
yeah, yeah, that's another one. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. But he's a guy that, he's all about practical effects as much as possible, and he
yeah,
hates ADR. He hates going in and re-recording dialogue
yep,
over what they've shot on set. He
yeah,
wants to always
yeah,
use what they do on set. And so
right,
that's just kind of a pet peeve of his that
sure.
he just,
So good or bad,
he
you're keeping that audio that was live on set. Yeah,
exactly,
that's probably
exactly.
the case.
Right. So I think that's probably what that was.
Yeah, there's a couple genres that I think get a bit tough when talking about whether a movie is good, and that's, to me, it's especially comedies and horror. So with comedy, that may be the most problematic, because what makes it good? If I laugh a lot, then what if the plot's terrible? Is it a great movie? What if I can't stand the main character, but it's a good movie overall?
Right.
But I don't laugh very much. I've seen those kind of movies that it was like, oh, it
Sure.
was a good movie. I didn't laugh very much though.
Right.
If I laugh throughout, is it a 5-star comedy no matter what?
Right. Right.
And then horror is kind of the same thing.
Hmm.
I've seen some scary movies that are just bad, just kind of bad movies, but I was kind
Right.
of like scared the whole time.
Right.
So, is that a good horror movie? I don't know.
Right.
You know what I mean? I've
Yeah.
seen really good movies that weren't that scary. Those are my favorite kind of horror movies.
Sure.
And so anyway, those are just some thoughts about you know problems within genres and determining what makes it great or terrible.
Sure, and I totally agree with that. Yeah, those two definitely come to mind when I think of genres that I either gravitate towards or don't. Those are two that I don't, I think, as much because it's difficult, I think, to pull that off.
It is,
And,
yeah.
there are a couple comedies that I am a huge fan of, watch all the time. Couple horror movies I watch every year on Halloween, so when they hit, they really hit for me. But
Yeah.
it's more often than not a miss just
Yeah.
because it is so subjective.
Yeah. I'll throw out another idea here. Like, what's the worst mainstream film that you've ever seen that you can think of? Like for me, think about it
Mm,
for a second, and I'll tell you mine. Well,
okay.
one of the worst ones I've seen is Battlefield Earth, the
Oh,
written by the
okay. Yeah,
Scientology
I
author L.
haven't
Ron Hubbard.
seen it, but I've heard of it.
It's really, really, really bad, and everybody
Yeah,
knows it. People
right.
watch it just to laugh at it, that kind of thing.
Sure.
And so, but I mean, Scientologists probably think it's good. There are people that actively watch it just to laugh at how bad it is. So again,
Right.
is that the worst movie ever? Maybe not,
Right.
because people are getting some entertainment out of it. It's like Sharknado or one of those, right?
Exactly. Right. Yeah, I just pulled up my letterbox because I got a few in mind, but Transformers The Last Night,
You hated that one?
hated it. Hated it.
Really?
I couldn't stand it. I could barely get through it. And I always
Yeah.
finish every movie I watch. I never walk out on one, but that was
Mhm.
one where I was very close to just giving up.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know if I've
Um,
seen. Is that the most recent one? I
that's
don't
the
think I've
fifth
seen that.
one. Yeah, the last one
Yeah, I
Michael
don't think
Bay
I've seen
did.
that one. Okay.
Yeah, so very, very bad. And that one was bad because I mean, the most convoluted story. I couldn't keep track of any character,
Yeah.
anything that
See,
was going on.
that can be
And
objectively bad, you know?
right. And that's another one I would say the editing was very bad.
Hmm.
I would even say a lot of the cinematography was bad, not necessarily because of the
Oh.
way it was shot or framed, but
Hmm.
he decided for some reason to jump back and forth between three aspect ratios, um, usually
Okay.
within the same scene. So it was just the black
What?
bars were going up and down and up and down and changing. within the same scene, they would cut from you're looking at one character, cut to another character, and it's a totally different aspect ratio.
What? That
It's
sounds like something
bizarre.
Mel Brooks should have taken up just for
Exactly,
comedy.
exactly. It's like he had to have done it on purpose. He had to have,
What?
because there's no way that that would be the biggest oversight in the history of
Yeah,
film.
yeah,
So I think he did it. I don't know. Consent for the audience is the only reason I can think he would do something like that.
yeah,
So
yeah.
anyway,
Wow.
that's definitely one that comes to mind.
Good to know. Yeah. Well, I'm sure we'll be talking about other aspects of this idea about subjective versus objective when we're going through our films here.
Yes, absolutely. One last thing I wanted to mention is, we are going to be talking about critic scores, Rotten Tomatoes, Letterbox. I wanted to briefly explain Rotten Tomatoes because it is very confusing, I think, for a lot of people. They look at the percentages and they say, oh, everyone liked this one or everyone hated this one. So with Rotten Tomatoes, what they do is if the movie has 50% on Rotten Tomatoes critic score, that means that half of critics liked it and half of critics did not like it. So
Mhm.
half gave it a more positive review, half gave it a more negative review. For some reason, Rotten Tomatoes still considers that rotten instead of fresh. It's sort of a weird system they have. So
I don't
I'm
like
not a
it. I
huge
don't like
fan
it.
of it. I don't use it very often, but
I
we
don't use
will be
that site
using it.
really.
Yeah, we'll be using it a little bit in this discussion. Just wanted to let everyone know. So before we jump into our movies, there's one other thing I wanted to mention that there's a term that gets thrown around a lot: guilty pleasure. We've all heard this term, and I guess that can apply to probably these movies that we're going to talk about here. But I kind of want to destroy that term. I don't think there should be such a thing as a guilty pleasure. That's a weird term to me. You should never feel guilt over liking something. So, part of my goal here is to kind of tear down this term and just like what you like, be vocal about it. Don't be mean about it. But, if you enjoy something, don't feel guilty. That should never be something that we feel when we're enjoying entertainment and art. And that's a kind of another aspect of something that I'm sure will probably come up as we discuss this is, are movies art or are they entertainment? For me, they're both. I think
Hmm.
there should always be a balance. You should always be entertained when you're watching a movie. If you're not, maybe that's another metric by which we'll kind of determine if a movie's good or bad. Is did I have fun watching this movie? Was I engaged and
Right.
entertained? So yeah, it can definitely be artistic. It should, I think a movie should have a message that it's trying to convey, trying to say something about who we are and why we're here and this kind of stuff. But it should also just be fun. It'd be a fun time. Sitting back and enjoying something on screen.
Yeah, guilty pleasure is a weird phrase. I've always thought when I see that about a movie I like, I'm like, well, why'd you have to say that? I mean, I
Right?
don't, why'd you have to make that weird? It's a good
Yeah,
movie. I
right.
don't.
Exactly. Totally. All right, so we're kicking off our bad movies list. We're going to start defending these so-called bad movies. I don't know why this one is called a bad movie. I don't know why people don't like it. I think it's great. It's called Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance. This came out in 2011. It is a comic book adaptation. A Marvel comic book called Ghost Rider was created back in the 70s when Evil Knievel was all the rage. It's kind of building off of his popularity. So it's about a guy named Johnny Blaze, very normal name, who is a stuntman. He's a daredevil, and he is cursed with transforming into the devil's bounty hunter. After making a deal with the devil to save his dying father, he now becomes the Ghost Rider, who's this flaming skeleton who rides a motorcycle. And so
Fully clothed though, but flaming skeleton.
he is fully clothed. That's true. That's true. Just his
Thankfully.
skull is what's on fire. And so yeah, he's still got his leather get up on, his biker gear. And so this movie, it came out in 2011. I vividly remember watching it in theaters. It's coming off. It's a sequel to Ghost Rider, right? So Ghost Rider came out in 2007, and this is, I say it's a sequel. It's not technically a sequel. I mean, it is and it isn't.
Hmm.
So this movie starts off with a sort of animated sequence where we kind of get a retelling of Johnny Blaze's origin story, how he became Ghost
Yeah.
Rider. It's a little different. All these elements are still there, but they do change a couple of things that happened in the first film that are different in this kind of, mini origin story that we get. But Nick Cage is back in the role, and you know, it's a role that he was so excited to play. He's a huge comic book fan. He was
Mm.
cast as Superman back in the '90s when Tim
Oh,
Burton was
right.
going to make a
Right.
Superman movie, and he didn't end up that ended up falling through. And so, you know, decade or so later, he got to finally gear up and become a superhero. And I think he fits this role so much better than he does Superman. Although I
Yeah.
did watch a recent movie, It Could Happen to You.
Oh,
You know that?
yeah. The comedy. Yeah.
Yeah, he played kind of a Clark Kent type character, and I was like, oh, maybe he could have played Clark Kent.
At
That would
least
have been
that side
interesting.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So anyways, you know, he's back in this role, and it's a new director, a directing duo, Neville Dean Taylor. These guys are kind of madmen. They directed the Crank movies. They
Oh.
directed Gamer with
Hmm.
Gerard Butler, and so they're kind of wild filmmaker. They're all about crazy action and going as pushing the boundaries as far as you can with the kind of stunts and wild set pieces that they can put together.
Hmm.
They're kind of stuntmen themselves, and I'll get into more
Oh,
about them soon. But
okay.
I wanted to start off with what did the critics say when
Yeah.
this movie was released? I'm going to start off with Peter Travers with Rolling Stone, who I really like. I like him a lot as a critic and as a personality. He's got a show, YouTube show, that where he interviews actors and stuff. And
Oh,
um, so I'm a big fan of his, but he was not a fan of this film. His quote is, "One look at the dreadful mess that is Ghost Rider: Spirit of Vengeance will turn your whisper into a primal cage scream. Make this movie stop." That was his quote, opening quote of his review on Rolling Stone. So he just wanted the movie to end. He didn't know what was going on. Not a fan. Another one I
gotcha.
pulled, a guy from the AV Club named Nathan Rabin. He said, instead of elevating the franchise, Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance ends up squandering even more potential. The character is surprisingly colorless, whether Cage is playing him or he's handed over to the CGI folks. So he wasn't a fan. He thought there was an opportunity to make a better movie from the original. By the way, I like the original too. I just don't like it quite as much as the sequel. Um, and so he thought they didn't elevate it like a good sequel should. And he felt that the character was colorless and that Cage was not playing him well.
Hmm.
That I couldn't disagree with more. So we'll kind of get into my own review of the movie now. Oh, by the way, it also won a Golden Raspberry Award, which is sort of like a
The film
Razzie.
did? Yeah.
Yeah, Golden
Hmm.
Raspberry for Worst Actor for Nicolas Cage and Worst Sequel.
Really?
Yeah,
What?
yeah, I know. It's so bizarre. It's so bizarre. I don't know how they decide those things, but I don't get it. So for me, going into any movie, you need to ask, what is the director's vision here? What are they going for? Are the filmmakers trying to make this deeply dramatic motion picture, about this, deep character and the character study on what he's going through? Or
Right.
are they just trying to make a wild action movie?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
for
Fair
me,
enough.
for me, this is clearly a silly, goofy, over the top action film.
Hmm.
It's sort of like a B monster movie almost, some aspects of it. You have to remember it's based on a comic book written for kids about a guy who transforms into a skeleton, rides a motorcycle. It's they're not going for any serious fare here, right? That's the first thing I keep at the forefront of my mind. What
Yeah.
is this? What are they trying to do here? And I think it's pretty clear from the opening scene. I mentioned that opening animation sequence. It's very silly and just kind of over the top, right? What they do well here is, all the technical aspects I think are top notch. I'll mention that first. It was all shot on location in Romania.
Mm,
So I think that the location shooting adds a lot to the film.
it
I
does.
think I think it just looks good. They're shooting at all these old castles and stuff
Yeah. Yeah.
that just they look cool. Beautiful countryside,
Hmm.
mountains, really great scenery. They've got that going for them. Of course, the action. So the action sequences to me are exciting, engaging, and sometimes scary. I think they actually do a really good job of making the rider feel like a monster, feel like this kind of creature,
Right.
otherworldly being who's kind of in our world now, and he's just, nonstop. He has a mission and he's going to complete it. They also use his powers very well. So he's got a kind of interesting set of powers. One of them is the flame, which he can shoot from his hands, and he can kind of do different things with fire. He also has this chain, which I thought they made
Right.
really great use of in this
Yeah, that's
one,
pretty cool.
even better than the original.
Yeah.
He's of course got his motorcycle, so he uses that a
Hmm.
lot in these fight sequences and chase sequences. And then
Right.
he has what's called the penance stare, and this is an
Yeah.
ability where he basically just looks at you and he turns all the evil that you've done against you. So
Right.
the bad guys are kind of experiencing all the bad stuff that they've done
Yeah,
again.
that's a little different.
Yeah, it's very unique and it's
Hmm.
difficult to shoot. And I was actually got to watch this with the commentary on.
Oh.
It's one of the more fun commentaries. It's one of the
Hmm.
picture-in-picture ones where the
Oh,
directors
good.
actually
Yeah,
come on
I like
screen
those.
and they pause the movie and they'll talk about it and
Yeah.
go behind the
Yeah.
scenes footage. It's really, really cool.
Hmm.
And they really put a lot of thought into the penance stare specifically. He does it a couple of times in the movie,
Hmm.
and they didn't want to overdo it. They didn't want to, you know, use a lot of effects and things. It's really just based on
Yeah.
performance. So they spent a lot of time finding the right actor who could actually emote in a way that wasn't it wasn't because they didn't want it to be physical pain that he was going through and a lot of wincing and kind of like
Hmm.
hurting like that. It
Yeah.
was more
Right.
emotional, so it
Right.
had to be in his eyes and in his face and how he
Right.
was portraying it. And I thought they pulled that off really well. So they did all of that really well. The villains in this movie, I think, are a good, contrast to Ghost Rider. So it's mostly just thugs with guns. That's pretty much mostly what he's facing in the movie. But there is a villain about halfway through the movie who becomes the supernatural character called Blackout. And Blackout has the ability to decay anything he touches. So he
Hmm.
can kill anything he touches. And he also can create darkness around anyone he wants to, so they can't see what's going on. And I thought the way they shot that was really interesting. Something I hadn't seen before
Hmm.
in a superhero movie. The superhero genre has taken off now since this movie came out. It's become the number one genre in the world. And so
Yeah.
I go back to this one a lot just because I find it's very unique in the way it
Hmm.
uses its superhero, the supervillains and their powers,
True.
and the
Yeah.
way it shoots action. I feel like they took a lot of risks with it. So that's another element of what I like. The camera work I feel is excellent.
Yeah. It's
Um,
very creative.
it is. Going back to these directors,
Hmm.
they're really stunt guys. I mean, these guys really put themselves on in the harnesses. There's a scene in the opening chase sequence with Idris Elba's character Moreau where he goes off a cliff and he turns around
Hmm.
and he shoots his gun at the
Yeah.
car.
Yeah.
The director was operating the camera and went off the cliff with Idris Elba's stunt double. They have this huge crane. It's a real cliff that they're on location, and he goes
Yeah.
off the cliff with them just so he could get that shot, and it
Right.
was just really
Right.
impressive. So stuff
Yeah.
like that, they're just going over the top. The chase sequences, particularly at the end of the movie, they're
Hmm.
doing stuff on rollerblades and skateboards and on the backs of cars. They're hanging on. I mean, it's just really nuts when you see what these guys
Yeah.
did. It's
Yeah.
really impressive. So I really like that element of it. As I said up
Hmm.
top, the visuals are always going to be kind of, the primary thing for me.
Right.
And they nailed it on that level for me. Nicolas Cage. Let's talk about this guy. I mean, he is just a crazy actor in that he will get into a character no matter what he's playing. And he's
Hmm.
talked a lot recently. He's done a lot of these VOD movies, direct to video, direct to
Yeah.
streaming. He's
Yeah.
been criticized a lot for that. I haven't seen a lot of them, but the ones that I have seen, he goes all in.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
he doesn't give
He's
a
a really good actor, honestly.
he
He just gets
is
a bad name. Well, he was
right.
on he's made fun of, I think on Saturday Night Live. Wasn't he made fun of for taking every film role that comes along and has like no
Yes.
regard for how good the movie might be?
Yes.
And that, even if that's true, he's an actor. He's hired for a part. I mean, why
Right.
would he? I mean, I guess you can be discerning and then have your principles, but you could also have a lot less cash.
Exactly.
But
Right.
he's a very good actor. He is one of my favorite actors, unless it's a really bad movie, of course.
Right.
But yeah, he doesn't usually phone it in.
No, exactly. Exactly. He does not phone it in. He really goes all in. And this is a character, like I mentioned, that he was really into.
Yeah.
He, read the comics growing up and it was something he was really excited about. And I think, after the first movie, did well enough to greenlight a sequel. He kind of wanted it to be a reboot in a way. He wanted it to be different. He's kind of playing the ultimate anti-hero here. He's sort of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, type character where he's playing just, kind of normal guy who's hiding out at the beginning of the movie. He's trying to get away from being the Ghost Rider. He's living on his own. And the directors and as they were talking to Nicolas Cage about it, they kind of wanted to depict him almost like a drug addict, where he
Hmm.
kind of likes being the writer. He feels like he needs to be, but he knows the damage that comes with it, and so he
Yeah,
tries to
yeah,
stop it. And so I thought that was an interesting element,
it is.
that
Yeah.
is kind of an undercurrent in the film that I thought they did pretty well. Watching the behind the scenes, he is playing the writer all the way through. So there actually is no fully CGI Ghost Rider. Every time we see the writer on screen, it is Nicolas Cage. And what
Right.
they did was they painted his face like a skull. So his
Oh, did
face
they
is
really?
it's painted white with these big
Interesting.
black eyes. And
Ah.
then they have this headpiece on him that is all these orange LED lights. So they
Oh.
actually could get the light on the costumes to make it look like, the flame.
Oh.
And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
even, other actors he's interacting with, they would get the light off of them. So
Oh,
really
brilliant.
smart way to do
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
And yeah, look, he just goes all in. Like I said,
yeah,
this performance is absolutely insane. There's an entire scene where he's literally just screaming at the camera as he's
yeah,
writing and
yeah.
transforming and trying to
That's
stop
great.
himself from transforming. It's
That's great.
just
Yeah,
so much fun to watch. It's
yeah.
like it's crazy and kind of scary, but also funny. You can't help but kind of
Mm-hmm.
smile and laugh at it when you're
Mm-hmm.
watching. So I just think he does a phenomenal job. The supporting cast is good. We got Kieran Hines here. We've got a lot of just good actors, not huge name actors. The budget on this is pretty small,
Mm.
smaller than the original. That was the only way they would greenlight it, because the first one it did well, but not quite well enough to greenlight a sequel unless they could, dial the budget back a little bit. And they did, but I think they make even better use of it here. They're sometimes, a bigger budget can be a detriment to a film. I think that smaller budgets, you're forced to be more creative
Yeah,
with your
yeah,
decisions, and I think that shows here big time. This, one of the critics mentioned the CGI. I feel like it's really solid.
yeah, yeah.
I feel like it's not overdone too. I feel like if they tried to do
Mm-hmm.
a lot with it, it probably would have suffered. But one thing that stood out to me is a lot of this is shot during the day and right in broad
Yeah,
sunlight,
right.
and that is a lot more difficult to get CGI right in daylight. Um, a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah, exactly.
a lot of movies all shoot during night to hide bad CGI. That happens a
Mm-hmm.
lot.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I thought they did a really good job with all the effects. A lot of it's practical, though. I think that's why it works, is because they're kind of
Mm-hmm.
just enhancing, like all the car flips and
Right.
all that. That's all real,
Yeah,
you know.
exactly.
And so I think that's why it looks as good as it does. One thing I wanted to mention that's kind of become a thing recently is MCU fans with both WandaVision, Loki, Moon Knight, all these kind of supernatural characters. They always, everyone online assumes that Mephisto is going to be the villain, and he's like basically the
Mm.
MCU's Satan, like their version of who
Oh, is
the
that right?
devil is, who's played by
Yeah,
Kieran Hines in this movie. So we
right.
finally get him, guys. We got a movie with him already.
Right,
He's in this
exactly.
one. We haven't seen the MCU's version of him yet, but I just thought that was a funny thing that I realized. So yeah, all in all, I just like this. I think it's fun. I think it's got great action, great visuals. The music is good as well. It's not
Mm-hmm.
award winning score or anything, but it's
It
serviceable.
is good. Mm-hmm.
I liked it. So you know, I just enjoy watching a flaming skeleton riding a motorcycle. What can I say? I'm a man of simple taste sometimes, and I think this just really works. So, but look, a lot of the criticisms aimed toward the script. It's not a great script. It's a story we've kind of seen before. It's sort of Terminator 2, basically. This
Mm-hmm.
sort of bad guy has to become good and save this little kid and his
Yeah,
mom from these
yeah,
bad guys that are coming after him. We've
right.
kind of seen it before, but to me, it works. A lot of people didn't like the CGI. I think it's great. The acting, I think it's good. Again, no Oscar winners here, but I
Right.
really buy into what's going on, and
Yeah, yeah.
can get wrapped up in it. So yeah, I really like Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. What's your take on this, Bert? I'm curious.
I hadn't seen either film. I
Okay.
started to watch the first one years ago and hated what I saw and turned it off after a few minutes. So
Yeah.
I went back and watched both of them because I
Oh,
felt like I
okay.
had
Oh,
to.
cool.
Interestingly enough, I don't think you have to watch the first one, and in
Yeah.
fact, I would recommend that someone go by that course and not watch the first one.
Right.
I did watch the first one in its entirety, and I hated it.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
it's just
Gotcha.
it's so different. These two films are night and day difference. I
They
mean, like
are.
literally, because the
Yeah.
first one, like you said, the first one's very dark, filmed at night,
Right.
and the second one is it's bright, it's colorful, it's different
Mm-hmm.
locales.
Yep.
You can tell it's made by someone different, you know.
Right. Right. Totally different
And
style.
the acting I thought was really bad in the first one. Like Nicolas
Mm.
Cage's accent kind of comes and goes. Like
Yeah.
just like if all those things that are criticisms were said about the first one, I'd probably pile on. But I
Right.
don't get it with this one. It's almost
Yeah.
like when someone criticizes this film, it's like, well, did you see the first one? Because this is a major upgrade, actually,
Right.
in my
Right.
opinion.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
I mean, what an interesting and fun film. I mean, it's not perfect, but it was enjoyable throughout. I really like, I'm big into visuals, and I mean, it clearly wasn't even the same type of effects. Like, for instance, like this one was a lot more polished, and I noticed like even the fire effects, when he was like riding a vehicle and the vehicle's like it was a motorcycle, when it's on fire and
Yeah.
his skull is on fire, like the fire was just almost like liquid. It was like
Yeah.
really different looking, and
Yeah.
it just made it look really stylized. Like, I'm not saying it was
Right.
more realistic. It probably was
Sure.
maybe less realistic, but this is like you said, it's like an action movie
Yeah.
based on a comic book for kids about,
Right.
if you're not going to accept the premise, then don't even watch
Sure.
it.
And
Right.
one thing I'm glad you brought that up because I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to mention that too is I think it kind of is more real, and especially when in regards to the skull itself, which is totally black and charred,
Yeah, it's a lot cooler.
it makes more sense to me. And his
Yeah.
even his suit is kind of like all melted and weird.
Dude, there's a scene at the beginning when it shows a close up of him when he
Yeah.
first switches to the rider mode,
Right.
and you can see the close up of like the side of him and his clothing is bubbling because that's
Yes.
how hot, that's how super heated it is.
Yes.
I was like,
Right.
whoa, that's awesome.
Yeah, I
Stuff
know.
like that is
Yeah,
awesome.
little details. Yeah, for
Right,
sure.
right. Yeah. And so I can't think of another time where I've had such a huge difference between a first film and a
Mm,
sequel
yeah.
in ratings. Because star ratings, I mean, I'm probably at a 1 for the first film,
Yeah.
and for this one, I'm probably at like 3.5.
Oh,
It
cool.
was very enjoyable.
Great.
A couple moments I wanted to mention. You said almost exactly what I had noted, because there's that scene where he's in the back of a truck with basically John Connor and Sarah Connor is
Right.
driving. That's
Right.
exactly what I wrote down.
Yeah.
And then oh, and I mentioned, yeah, I even wrote down, a lot of this was filmed during the day, and that makes it harder to nail the CG. And
Yep.
you and I were thinking exactly, like
Yep.
it looks so much better if you can pull it off
Yeah.
and it looks good during the day.
Right.
Come on, you can't say that's bad CGI.
I
I,
know.
I will identify bad CG if I see it. There
Right.
really wasn't any of that in this movie. It was
Yeah.
very well made.
I agree.
And then one really cool moment I want to mention was at one point, the rider hops aboard a truck, and the truck like transforms into like a fire truck, like not a fire
Yeah.
truck, but a
Right.
truck that has
Yeah.
fire flames shooting out of it and stuff.
Sure.
It was really, really cool. There's some really cool moments like that, different camera angles that were really unique. Yeah, it's an enjoyable action movie for sure.
Yeah. Even that crane he gets in, he turns that into like they call it a hell vehicle. So it's the
Oh
hell
yeah, yeah,
cycle. And then, yeah,
right.
any vehicle like he gets in, he can transform it as
Yeah,
well,
that's
which
awesome.
is,
Yeah, I
yeah,
like that.
super cool. Super cool.
Yeah,
So,
good
yeah,
stuff.
I haven't rewatched the first one in a while. I remember enjoying it. I'm not as crazy about it, obviously, as I am about this one, or I would have been talking about that one. But the more I watch this one, the more that one goes down in my mind because, like you said, it's not on the same level. It's a totally different style, and
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
it's just not
Exactly.
not the same. So
Right,
good. Well,
right.
I'm really glad you enjoyed that. That's cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump into your next
Yeah,
one.
my first one I had here I want to talk about is Equilibrium from 2000. I think it's 2002. It was
Yeah,
before Christian Bale did Batman.
right.
And just a brief recap of it. It's a film that's set in the near future. I think World War III takes out most of the population, so this is like a dystopian tale.
Yep.
It's a society in which all feelings are suppressed. The citizens literally take an injection, which is like a supplement that suppresses their feelings. They take that if you take it several times a day. The idea is that this is like a utopia, and there's not going to be there's no feelings, so there's no war.
Hmm.
It's perfection, right?
Yeah.
No matter the cost, right? This is the way
Right.
it should be. And then Bale, of course, plays he's like the highest ranking officer. John Preston is the character's name. He's called a Grammaton cleric first class. And then so he's pretty high up in the organization that or the dictatorship that sort of runs this the world, I guess.
Right.
And then he ends up leading these sort of SWAT style teams. They go around
Mm.
getting rid of contraband, like music and famous works of art, like the Mona Lisa. And
Yeah.
then they also execute people if they're found with the contraband. They just on the spot execute them,
Hmm.
or if someone refuses to even take their shot, their interval, they execute people. I mean, it's
Right.
pretty extreme,
Yeah.
right? And then one day he sort of damaged Preston, the character played by Bale. He sort of damages his interval shot thing, and then he starts to feel for the first time. And then it's almost like feeling is like a drug. So ironically,
Mm.
that's almost like the drug.
Right.
He has to keep going after that by not taking the injection,
Hmm.
because then he starts to feel everything, and he doesn't want to stop doing that. He starts to have like an internal crisis, and then he meets this woman, and she's scheduled for execution, and so he decides he wants to save her and sort of rebel against the system.
Hmm.
And he's a complete badass in this
Right.
movie.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, and the characters in this film, they're all very cold, sterile. You know, it's like a very sterile environment. There's not very much color. A lot of the most of the buildings, I think, are just like very flat and square, and you
Hmm.
know, there's bland clothing. I think everybody
Right.
dresses the same and really bland
Yeah.
clothing. And I feel Bale shows some range here. He goes from like practically being a walking robot to like feeling all of the human emotions, you know. So I
Mm.
feel like there is that in this film.
Yeah.
This woman that he finds out she's going to be executed. Oh, I mentioned that he goes out of his way to meet the resistance and sort of you know, helps them fight back. So
Right.
it's not you know, the most original concept,
Sure.
obviously, and it's low budget, but I feel like they absolutely make the most of it, especially for an action film. I think the action scenes are really cool, and it's not meant to be realism, it's supposed to be allegory, I think, right? Did you want to give me your thoughts on it, or you want me to give the
Yeah.
review first?
Yeah. Yeah. I had seen this. I think maybe 2 years ago for the first time.
Okay, okay.
But I wanted to rewatch it because I'd only seen
Mm-hmm.
it the once. So I did rewatch it, and
Yeah.
it is a good movie. I really think it's well made.
Mm.
I think they do a lot of interesting stuff with lighting in this movie,
Sure, yeah,
that I think is really interesting. But like you said, it's not the most original. It's very derivative. I
sure.
feel like it almost should have said based on 1984, George Orwell, because it's basically that story. I mean, if you know 1984, I've read 1984, I've seen the original film with
I
John
have
Hurt,
not. Yeah.
and it's basically exactly that. So I
Oh,
honestly I
okay,
don't know how
okay.
they got away with not saying it was that. I'm kind of surprised
Interesting.
they
Yeah,
weren't
yeah,
sued or something, but it's still a great story. I mean, it's
yeah,
one of these timeless
yeah.
dystopian stories that
Right,
is
right.
just so well done.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of 1984 with guns. There's no,
Yeah.
the original 1984. It's not action driven at all.
Right. This is an action
Um,
film. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And so, it reminded me of that, running of a lot of the Matrix. Of course, they're coming right off
Yeah.
the popularity of the Matrix. So
Yes. Yeah.
that's
3 years
to be
later. So
expected, at
yeah.
that point. It was just such a big deal. Kind of everyone
Mm-hmm.
was copying them. So
Right.
they do that, but they don't over stylize it. I felt they didn't, go with the slow mo and bullet time and all that
True.
stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
Um,
Uh-huh.
so they tone it down a little bit. The kind of gun fu action, was pretty neat. I thought it was, fun to
Mm-hmm.
watch all of that stuff. Bale is excellent as always. I think, like you said,
Yeah.
he's a character that's going through all these emotions for the first time, and
Yeah.
that's what a
Yeah.
difficult acting
That's
job
not
that would
easy.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So he does a good job. Supporting cast is good. Kurt Wimmer, who directed it, he's really
Yeah.
only done, I think, 4 movies, and I've only
Hmm.
seen one other one. It's called Ultraviolet, with
Oh, action
Mia
film. Yeah.
Jovovich.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not a fan of that at all. I thought that was
Gotcha.
terrible,
Gotcha.
terrible movie. So this is a huge step up from that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I enjoyed it. I don't think I enjoyed it quite as much as I enjoyed it the first time I watched it. But I'm still at
Yeah.
about 3 stars. I think it's
Okay.
a good movie. I just think it's
Yeah.
been done better elsewhere.
I would
Is kind
agree.
of
I would
where I
agree.
landed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So a couple quotes then I'll give here. David Grove
Sure.
from Film Threat gave it 1 star. He said, I can only conclude that the filmmakers were totally desperate. The whole film feels like it was thrown up at a wall in the hope that something would stick. Equilibrium shamelessly rips off every Orwellian science fiction and thriller in film history. What other reason is there besides sheer desperation for the film to be so stupidly violent? And what I find interesting is that he basically said it rips off every other science fiction thriller in film history,
Right.
and that must be why it's so violent. And I'm thinking, well, what? That's your point, that it's too violent? Like I would think
Right.
that just full stop after you say it rips off every film,
Right.
every
Exactly.
science fiction thriller film. And
Yeah.
yeah, we obviously does borrow from a lot of movies.
Right.
The fighting method in this film, they call it gun kata, and it's
Gun
where
kind of right.
you shoot at attackers and then you simultaneously make strategic dodging moves so that you can reduce the likelihood of being struck by return fire. And
Right.
it's ridiculous, I
Yeah,
mean,
it is.
but the thing is, like, how many action films actually create a new method of fighting and try to introduce that and pull that off? Like,
Yeah.
maybe they don't even completely succeed, but I think at least it's something different,
Sure.
especially
Sure.
given how much it's like the Matrix. They could have just
Right.
stuck with the martial arts or something like
Right.
that.
Sure.
And so it's, even I'm like, that's a little funny, the way that they're pulling that off.
Right.
But cheers to them for even, trying it.
I agree. I agree.
And then when I hear gun kata, I can't help but think of Jim Kata, the movie. Have you heard of Jim
I
Kata,
don't
the movie?
think so. No.
It's a 1985 film. It starred a then Olympic gymnast named Kurt Thomas, and
Okay.
it's basically the Most Dangerous Game, that book,
Oh,
and
sure.
yeah, all the
Yeah.
movies that have been made like
Yeah.
that, like Hunger
Right.
Games. It's like
Right.
that
Sure.
basically, except
Okay.
he's a gymnast, and so just randomly there's like all these like bars that he can like do like swing on and stuff
Right.
to kick people and stuff. It's really hilarious. I
Right.
haven't seen it since the 80s, but I always think of that when I hear gun kata when I'm watching the
Right.
movie.
Like the Lost World Jurassic Park kind of when the gymnast girl does the
Yes,
kick in
exactly
the
like that.
rafter.
That's Jim Cotta, the
Okay.
movie. You should look it up. It's hilarious.
Okay.
Don't watch it though. You'd probably hate
Yeah.
it.
All right.
Dennis Harvey from Variety gave it 1 star, and he said, "This is a Battlefield Earth comparison. If Equilibrium were a tad more fun."
Uh,
Come
right.
on, it's not that bad. I mean,
Right.
no, it really isn't. I mean, there's a few things in there that are kind of ridiculous,
Yeah,
but the
sure.
entire film of Battlefield Earth is just way over the top
Right.
and really just super laughable and not on
Yeah,
purpose. I mean, they're not trying to
sure.
make it a comedy.
Yeah.
Then this guy continues. Among numerous absurdities is Mary. That's the woman that Christian Bale is trying to save.
Right.
Mary marching like Joan of Arc or a volcano sacrifice jungle virgin to her sentence doom, an event prompting Preston, Bale's character, to declare she's scheduled for combustion, or a final digitized robo Tai Chi Fu face off between, and I think he means the gun kata,
Right.
between hero and chief nemesis that looks a whole lot like patty cake. And I think it's because I mean, it is a lot of like,
Right.
like this kind of stuff.
Right. Open-handed martial arts.
You're either along for the ride or you're not.
Right.
Like I said,
Right.
I appreciate the attempts with the gun kata thing, but
Sure.
okay, one more here. Much of the ultimately inspirational nonsense is drenched in the ominous, then heavenly choirs of Klaus Badelt's score, which doesn't get the joke either. Come on now, you got to drag Klaus Badelt down too.
Right. Come on.
He's just doing what he was told, and I actually really
Right.
like the score, and it is a
Yeah.
very serious score.
Right.
Uh, so I mean, if this guy thinks that it should be a joke, then I guess. But
Right.
again, the film is meant probably as more of a metaphor than anything, like a warning for our society. So
Yes.
I don't take it to mean that this is like, oh, this is what's going to happen in 50 years or something. No,
Right.
this is just meant to be like, oh, this could happen
Right.
if things went awry, but not really.
Yeah. Yeah, and doing it in an entertaining way. I mean, that was the
Yeah,
goal, obviously. There, it was like,
yeah,
should we just remake 1984? Well, let's do it maybe with some fun action. That
right,
seems like that was the
right,
idea. And I think that's a
right.
great idea. And I think they executed it pretty well.
Pretty well. Yeah, it's not
Pretty
a five
well.
star film,
It's not. It's not. It's
but
three for
yeah.
me. Where do you have it rating wise?
I didn't think about that, but probably 3.5.
Okay. That's
Yeah,
good. Yeah.
maybe 4, so right in that range.
Sure.
Yeah, I've watched it at least 4 times. I
Yeah.
mean, I like it each time I watch it.
Sure.
And I did want to point out that I can't help but think of Scientology comparisons with with the way that
Right.
this group is. It's like it's run by like a dictator. They suppress people that think outside their group.
Yep.
The children are treated like adults. Like his son is
Yeah.
like just like, I mean, it's almost like in charge of the adult, basically.
Right. Right.
They all dress alike. They all work for this
Hmm.
organization. There's no wealth, no vacations. They sort of blindly follow the father,
Yeah.
even though real bad things happen.
Right.
They have their own special lingo. Anyway,
Yeah.
I had to
Yeah.
mention that as well. It's kind of funny.
Definitely. Yeah. Very interesting. Very
Yeah.
interesting. Good. Good pick. All right. So the next movie I wanted to discuss is a very recent film called Mother Android. This was released on Hulu just last year. My wife and I watched it. I vividly remember watching it on New Year's to ring in the new year. We put this one on. Been one that I'd been looking forward to. I saw the trailer and was excited to watch it. So watched it together. And before I get into my review, I'll discuss a little bit about what people are saying about this movie. It's from a first time director. His name is Mattson Tomlin, and he both wrote and directed this. He's primarily a writer. He's written on a couple of movies, and people didn't like it. Didn't like his directorial debut for some reason. It only has 2.2 rating on Letterboxd and 32% on Rotten Tomatoes. Even lower audience score, 24% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is very strange to me. I'm not sure why people react this way to this movie, but I honestly don't think a lot of people have seen it. But it's unfortunate that the people that have seen it don't seem to not care for it as much. But I'm going to start with David Ellenick from IndieWire, who said, forgettable post apocalyptic pastiche that borrows liberally from The Terminator, The Last of Us, and A Quiet Place without building upon those influences with any new ideas of its own. That was his thought on it. Dennis Harvey with Variety said, this is an initially solid, then somewhat disappointing genre piece whose pretensions are out of its weight class. People, didn't really care for it that much, for various reasons, I guess. I'm a huge fan of this movie. I vividly remember us watching it and being very emotionally invested. We had just had our second child, and so we were kind of young parents and dealing with that whole thing. And so we were just really engaged with the characters. It's about a young
Yes.
couple,
So yeah.
who are pregnant and they have to survive this insane post-apocalyptic wasteland that's populated by all these robots that are looking to destroy humanity. And so they're kind of having to hide out, sneak around, and get to some type of civilization so they can, give birth. So it's quite a harrowing journey we take with these characters, and Mattson Tomlin. I just think he's really smart as both a director and a writer here. The dialogue isn't overdone. Usually, writer
Mm-hmm.
directors they kind of rely more on dialogue than they should, I think, and he doesn't. He really, I think,
Right.
understands that film. The visuals are primary, and I thought he did an excellent job here, especially as a first-time filmmaker. He really, it's quite an ambitious movie, even though it's somewhat small scale, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
It really goes big emotionally and with the characters. So he did a great job, and I think the reason is this movie is very personal for him. He was born in Romania during the Romanian Revolution, 1989.
Oh,
This is sort of his story in a way, or the story of his parents and his birth. That his parents had to give him up for adoption so that he could survive, basically.
okay.
That was kind of
Hmm.
his backstory. And so, this is, kind of made for his parents, kind of about them, about that situation. I think it just all works, and it, it's not just him, but the performances. Chloe Grace Moretz is an actress I've liked for a long time. I think she's really,
Yeah.
really good. This is maybe her best performance. I think she has a lot to
Yeah.
do here. She's kind of carrying the whole movie, and she just has a lot of different things she has to play, and she plays them all very effectively. I agree with the critic who said it was kind of a mix of a bunch of different sci-fi ideas, but I think at this point it's so difficult to come up with an original idea that mixes ideas is good enough. It's good enough to get me invested, especially if the characters are there and the journey that we take with them is satisfying. And I think that's what he does here. He definitely borrows all kinds of ideas. Yes, there have been robot apocalypse movies before, sure, but I thought he put a unique spin on it here, which I thought worked really well. And the unique spin of it is the couple, right? I think it's very
Mhm.
rare that we get a young couple in a movie
Right.
that really care
Right.
about each other. You can tell that they're, looking out for one another. They're not perfect, they're flawed characters, which I think makes them very relatable. They don't always make
Yeah.
the right decision throughout the movie, but I think that makes it that much more engaging and interesting. I've heard it said before, if characters in movies only make logical decisions, movies would be very boring. So,
Exactly.
there's that element of it that I think works well. There's a real sense of danger throughout the film. I'm always kind of on the edge of my seat when I watch
Mhm.
this, and so I thought that was well conveyed. There's a certain biblical allegory here, of course, as well. I think they even put her in like a kind of blue hood at one point and make her look like Mary at certain points in the
Maybe
movie.
so.
So there's this kind of biblical allegories which I liked, and then it's just well shot, well edited. It kind of has a gritty handheld style, a lot of it, which I think puts us in their shoes on the journey with them. I
Hmm.
think the robots, the design of those was pretty cool. They're human looking, but we kind of get to see under the skin a couple moments. That's kind of
Right.
freaky.
Yes.
And I thought that was pretty effective. So it's just kind of a good post-apocalyptic thriller is kind of how I would word it. Like the critic mentioned, Quiet Place kind of vibes, not quite as maybe
Hmm.
horror-esque, maybe in some moments, but not throughout. But just an effective movie that I don't get why people, I think again, it's one of those things where the headspace you're in, your own personal history maybe could play into how you respond. But we were both in tears by the end of it, honestly. That emotional final scene really got us, and we were just right there with it. So maybe it's just one of those that hit us at the right time, hit me at the right time. I don't know. Did you get a chance to watch it? I know you hadn't
I
seen
did
this
watch
before.
it.
Okay, what'd you
Yeah.
think?
I loved it.
Really good.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I did.
Yeah.
It did from the first scene, it doesn't you don't it's amazing where it ends up. Let's put it that way.
Right, right.
And it's very gritty and realistic.
Yeah.
But yeah, what an emotional film,
Mhm.
what an emotional experience to sit through it.
Yeah.
And I don't know how anybody could watch that final scene or two and not just be it's just a gut wrenching
Yeah.
thing, but it was just really powerful.
Yeah.
And I like those kind of movies, the post apocalyptic ones. I mean,
Yeah,
I
sure.
watch like all of them,
Right, right.
and I thought they did a good job of building this world,
Yeah,
and they do travel too, and everything you see,
right,
and it does kind of feel like it's really happening and that kind of thing, and it is tense,
right.
and the actors in it are good.
Hmm.
I got more like Walking Dead kind of vibes,
Okay.
actually,
Okay.
because I've watched a few seasons of that show. But the idea that there could always be something lurking around the corner,
Right.
and I thought the androids were really creepy.
Yeah.
They're with their eyes glowing blue in that house. That was
Yes.
really creepy,
Oh
and she had to
man.
sort of navigate them and that kind of thing.
Right.
And the birthing scene was really touching.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then there's that twist, of course. I don't really want to spoil it.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, this might end up in my top 10 for the year, honestly.
Oh wow.
I was really
Cool.
moved by it. It was so good.
Yeah.
I can't believe, well, actually it was last year, I guess. Was it
Right.
21?
2021. Yeah.
So it might even be in my top 10 for last year.
Awesome.
I thought it was great. Yeah.
Good. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, I'm glad what you mentioned about the world building too, because they kind of do just throw you in a little bit. Like it doesn't
Mhm.
over explain things. Like there's no opening text like here's the
Yeah,
year, here's what's happened. It's like
exactly.
that opening scene just throws you in. Like here's
Hmm.
what it is, here's what happened. You're just experiencing it through their eyes. I felt like,
Hmm.
which was very smart way to do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
So
and I like this film so much that before our podcast even I'm like, what on earth could people like have a problem with this film for?
yeah,
Like it is
I
so
know.
emotional and so well
Yeah.
acted and all that. And so I actually watched just like a 3-minute review from IGN,
Uh-huh.
and the reviewer, not to steal some of your thunder
No, yeah, go
on the
ahead.
critics, but this reviewer said that it's a disaster post-apocalyptic film that proves it has nothing new to contribute to the genre. Well, that's the problem, is that you think that's the film you're watching. This is a
Right.
drama.
Yeah.
This is a drama about two people trying to survive and clinging to the little family that they have
Yes.
left in the world. I mean,
Right.
so
Yeah.
maybe that's the problem.
That
People see Android and they're like, all right, androids, yeah,
that's
let's just
right. A big
you
action
know,
movie, right, is what they're
right.
expecting. Yeah, the expectations. That's another thing we should probably talk about is expectations do have a lot to do with how we react to a film.
Absolutely. And
Um,
my next film is going to be big on that. But yeah,
okay,
carry on
cool.
what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because people were probably expecting, okay, Mother Android. Yeah, it's probably about Terminator. It's like, she's got
I
to give
thought
birth
she
to this
became
kid
a
and becomes
yeah.
action hero, defeats the
Yeah.
robots. Like,
I thought what's mother slash android. I thought, oh, well, she's like a mother, I guess, and then she becomes an android and does android
right,
stuff. That's what I thought it
right,
was gonna be.
right,
So
right.
maybe the title is partially to blame.
That could be. That could be. Although it makes sense when you watch the movie,
It
but
does.
but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that could have set expectations in a kind of weird place.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a good
Right.
point.
It wrote checks that wasn't prepared to cash or whatever that saying
Sure.
is.
Right, exactly. Right. Cool. All right, man. Well, that's all I had on that one. What's your next movie?
My next one is The Village. I'm going to go about this a little bit different way. Um,
Okay.
I'm first of all full spoilers on this one because there's really no way to talk about the film and the criticism without
True. If you
spoilers.
have not seen Village, go watch it,
Please don't listen to
then
this
come
if you
back. Yes,
haven't.
definitely.
What if I was describing a film and I said, check out this plot? A group of like-minded people decide to buy a preserve and like an animal sanctuary and create like a closed community in the woods, miles from anywhere, so that their children can be like sheltered and safe. And then the leaders of this community, they're going to use the illusion of monsters in the woods to scare them into not leaving.
Right.
And I mean, just like imagine M. Night describing it this way, if this is how he really did,
Right,
you
right.
know. And then what they're going to do is they're going to replicate what it was like to live 200 years ago. They're going to pay off the government so that planes won't fly over, and all the children are going to think they're living in prairie days or whatever. That sounds like an interesting concept, but obviously that's
Yeah.
nowhere near the way that this is presented. And this is
No.
the problem is that, and this is what I gather from the critics.
Mm.
This is a love story, really, between Bryce Dallas Howard's character and Joaquin Phoenix. At its heart, it's a love story,
Yep.
but it was marketed massively as like this monster movie, and
Yep.
it's M. Night, so people were thinking, "Oh, this is going to be great." And I'm sure there were. I don't know if I saw the trailer, but there were probably clips of the monsters in the trailer, right? Because that's what
Sure.
gets people out to the
Yeah.
theater. And so there was massive disappointment. I
Mm.
remember I was working at a theater when this came out, and I opened the doors, and people came out. People had watched The Village, and I heard people talking about it. I couldn't help it, and these two people walked past me, and they were talking about how they were so disappointed that the whole time it was a modern day village. They thought that was awful, and I'm like, oh, I guess I know what the big secret is in this movie, and it's one of the two secrets, right?
Right.
But they were annoyed because they
Yeah.
didn't like the setup or the execution.
Yeah.
But I think really what M. Night created here was something that this film it's organic,
Mm.
it's enchanting, it's beautiful. I think that the color palette, the look and feel of the film, that's what I'm there for. I mean,
Right.
and the acting, like he got these world-class actors, William
Right.
Hurt, Joaquin Phoenix,
Mm.
Dallas Bryce Howard was a newcomer,
Right.
but she's tremendous in it. Sigourney Weaver, though, Cherry Jones, Brendan Gleeson,
Yeah.
Adrian Brody. I think he'd already won for the piano. I mean,
Right.
these are some heavyweights,
Yeah.
and of course, I love the music. One of the
Mm.
best
Yeah.
scores ever. I talked about briefly in our score podcast,
Right.
and actually, James Newton Howard was nominated for an Oscar for the score.
Oh, wow.
And there's no CGI in this film. It's
Right.
all practical.
Right.
Sometimes I think when I'm watching a movie that has CGI and it's a character that looks roughly like a human, size wise, I'm always thinking I'd much rather see someone in a costume and then
Right.
modify it from there if you have to.
Yes.
That's it's always going to be a better way to go.
Sure.
And then the main character, she's of course blind, and so sound is a huge part of this film.
Mm.
And at one point, she's got to go through this journey in the woods, and she doesn't know might be coming to attack her. Now, of course, her dad did tell her the monsters weren't real, but he
Right.
said, but it's based on a legend of actual
Mm.
creatures in the woods. So she
Right.
doesn't know.
Sure.
She doesn't really know. And in fact, in a deleted scene, there's a point where she comes across the wind chimes that make the howling noises,
Yeah.
and they're all going like crazy, and she's right by them, and she thinks that there's monsters all around her, and so she
Oh,
talks to them and says, please let me pass, and that kind of thing. It's really
okay.
creepy. Like, I don't know
Interesting.
why they cut that scene because it
Yeah.
was very effective.
Yeah.
The script is wonderful. Every statement that's laid out in question early on is answered. It's a really tight script if you criticize it, you know what I mean? It's
Sure.
really rewarding, I guess.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of questions after I watch it too. Like, not everything makes sense, but to me, let me go through a couple Well, give me your thoughts on Village before I read a couple quotes that tear it apart.
Yeah, Village is interesting. So first time I watched it, basically when it first came out, so I would have been 13. Didn't care for it. Wasn't into it,
Ah,
didn't like it, thought it was
okay.
boring and
Oh,
just
okay.
wasn't my thing.
Okay.
Um, cut to however many years later that I ended up
Right.
watching it again. I don't
Yeah.
remember. This shot to the top of my favorite M. Night movies list. I mean, it's right there with Unbreakable for me.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's pretty much a perfect movie. The like you
Yeah.
mentioned, the visuals are just stunning. Roger Deakins shot this,
Right.
who's an
Right.
acclaimed cinematographer, and he just did such a great job
Hmm.
shooting it. The use of color is so
Right.
important to the themes and the story, and they all represent, different things. And the cast, like you mentioned, all-star cast, every single one of them. I fully believe in every role. Bryce Dallas Howard, she carries the film. It's to me, it's her movie,
I
even
think so.
though
Yeah.
Joaquin Phoenix certainly has a major role to play as well. But yeah, it's a love story. It's a love story between those two characters. There's so many just deep themes. I mean, we could talk all day about the human nature. It's kind
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
the ultimate thesis of the film is you can't escape human nature. No matter what you do,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's always going to be, if there's people, there's going to be evil because that's in our nature. So it's just so effective on that level. The genuinely scary and
Hmm.
just, yeah, so well done at every level. His writing is so good, and then I think it's maybe his most well written film. The dialogue, the story in general, very effective. I like the slow reveal. It's kind of not like boom, here's a twist, here's what it all is. It's kind of slow. It's a
Yeah.
very slow moving film. It's not a fast paced movie.
Right.
It's
Hmm.
like, you got to really invest the time. And that's probably why I didn't like it when I was younger. I was into
Yeah. I
more
probably wouldn't have
fast
either at
paced,
13.
intense
Yeah.
movies. So, it really does a good job of these slow reveals and giving the kind of elders, a reason for doing what they're doing. Their
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
intentions were so good,
Right.
because of these tragedies that had happened to them. You can totally
Yeah.
feel for them and where they're coming from. It's just not a good idea. It didn't work out so well, but yeah, just super effective filmmaking on every level. I
Yeah.
think again, one of M Night's best.
Well, let me go over a couple reviews here. Chris Stuckman is probably, he's probably one of the few movie reviewers that I follow on YouTube. He hugely anticipated this film, and
Mm.
he talks about how he really thought it was going to be this, creatures versus villagers showdown and all this kind of stuff. And then he shows up and it's a period romance film. And
Right.
so it's true. I mean, this is the problem,
Yeah.
the marketing, and even M. Night
Right.
has talked about how he kind of regrets the way the film was marketed.
Yeah.
Stuckman also said he feels that the film cheats, unlike some other movies of M. Night, because, for instance, the creatures make sounds that don't sound entirely human. And how did the person in the costume make those noises? And he
Mm.
may have, there could be something to that if
Yeah.
there's one minor criticism. But the thing is, to me, it didn't really take away from the movie.
Right.
But
I mean
I
that.
could see it as a tiny cheat, maybe.
Yeah, that could be something that the character is hearing in their mind. Maybe that's a
Yeah,
way to explain it. I don't know. But yeah, that
right,
might be a good
right.
point.
Yeah, when your adrenaline's pumping and all that, yeah.
Sure. You could hear
Um,
something like that.
Right. And then he has a big problem with, I kind of alluded to it before, but the fact that Ivy is told about the fact that the creatures aren't real before she goes into the woods, but then yet she's acting like she's afraid.
Mm,
But, and so, I mean, this movie would be really difficult to edit. The problem is if you don't tell her ahead of time and she goes into those woods, then when she hears that, then she's really going to be
right.
freaking out. And that's
Right.
probably why M. Night cut that scene where she comes across the wind chimes.
Right.
So
Right.
it's
Yeah.
tough either way you go. But either
Yeah.
way, it would still be scary for her. She can't see. And then
That's the
she's still
thing.
hearing these same noises that have terrorized her whole life.
Yes, that's exactly the point I was going to make. Her whole life she's been told this. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just instilled in it. It's like, yeah, when you're told something your whole life and then all of a sudden you're told it's not true, you're
Yeah.
still going to be thinking, is it really not true? Are you sure?
Right.
Like,
Did my dad
so
just tell me that so I wouldn't be scared in the woods?
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to me that works.
Yeah, I think a better criticism is why did they have to send Ivy? Why
Right.
didn't they just send one of the elders who already knows that this is? So I mean,
Yeah.
but it's scarier this way. Um,
Exactly.
Here's Roger Ebert. He gave it 1 star. He said,
Mm.
M. Night is a director of considerable skill who evokes stories out of moods, but this time, alas, he took the day off. Eventually, the secret of those is revealed. It's a crummy secret, about one step up from the ladder of narrative originality from It Was All a Dream. It's so witless, in fact, that when we do discover the secret, we want to rewind the film so we don't know the secret anymore. A colossal miscalculation. I mean, I don't know if you can figure out why he is so I don't really understand why people are so annoyed by both of the secrets in the film, honestly.
I can't figure it out either. I really don't know because it just works. I mean, it just for me, it just it
Yeah.
makes sense, and
Right.
I get
Right.
it. I get. I don't know if there maybe is a disconnect between the themes that he's trying to
Presentation.
explore. Are they not?
Okay.
Are they not connecting with that? Maybe
Yeah. Well, that's why
that
I
they're
started
pretty
out by
obvious. I don't know.
right. That's why I started out by describing it the way I did, because it's almost like if you heard of a story of this where like these elders decide to set up this little village,
Right.
it's kind of cool. So why
Yeah.
don't people like the review when they find that out? I don't understand that.
Yeah.
This guy Mick LaSalle from San Francisco Chronicle gave it 1 star. He said the village seems poised to become as cheesy in its effects as a low budget horror film. M. Night's gracefulness keeps this movie just out of that abyss.
Hmm.
But it is probably fairly low budget.
Yeah.
I don't know what he means by that the effects are cheesy. But again, I'm glad it's not a CG thing. I mean, I want as
Yeah.
much realism as can be.
Sure. Sure.
And this last one, I have to go over this last one. Stephanie Zacharek from Salon.com gave it 1.5 out of five
Oh.
stars. Um, M. Night has bafflingly earned a reputation as a maker of supernatural thrillers for thinking folks, although he rarely seems to be thinking himself. I do wonder why he has any reputation at all after giving us that cheap alien in Signs, a tall guy skulking around in Mel Gibson's family room in stretchy pajamas. What? Come on
Did
now.
she see an unfinished version of the movie?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That don't attack Signs. That's
That's
that's an even
bizarre.
almost an even better movie than
Right,
Village, I think.
exactly.
Um, yeah, she says the movie's look is strangely over polished. I disagree. I don't think the movie's polished at all.
No, it's very rough,
No,
I think.
MCU films are polished.
Right.
I thought the Ghost Rider sequel was very polished in a good
Sure.
way, but
Right.
this is you're outdoors in a
Yeah.
little like in the woods and on this
Yeah.
sort of like small town. Like there's nothing that's
Right.
gloss about this. So I don't like where's that come from? I don't get it.
I don't
She
either.
says the picture has an old Sturbridge Village vibe to it. It's a tourist attraction. I looked it up. It's a
Mm,
village in Maine. I mean, it's got legit businesses and homes and
yeah.
things like that. You can
Right.
go and you can churn butter and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
I take issue with all these comments like this that I could find, except for maybe that one about the noises that the creatures
Right.
make.
Yeah, I agree. It's weird. I don't get a lot of those criticisms either because it works. Again, I just think every level of it, he really knew what he was doing. He had a clear vision for this movie and
Mm-hmm.
executed it very well. So yeah, I'm not sure what their thinking is.
Yeah, I could gush over the film more, but that's all I've got on the
Yeah.
village.
All right, let's move on now to my next film. Last one I'll be talking about a director that I'm a huge fan of. Really like all of his movies, but this is one of my favorites. It's called Sucker Punch. This is a 2011 film directed by Zack Snyder, one of
He's
our
one of my
most.
favorites too.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool. Yeah. I know you like
yeah.
Snyder a lot. So, yeah, we're on the same page with him. A lot of people aren't. A lot of people really dislike this filmmaker.
Oh,
He's one that causes, I think, a lot of controversy and is just,
mm,
divisive because he has such a specific style. His visuals are unmistakable. When you are watching a Snyder movie, you're watching a Snyder movie, and that's what I like about him. I think really all the great directors have that. I think Nolan definitely has that. Shyamalan definitely has that as well. So he's just really engaging in his visuals, visual storytelling. He's, I think, one of the best working today actually with it. He wrote this. He doesn't write all of his movies, but he co-wrote this with a guy named Steve Shibaya. It's a budget of 82 million, so it's actually not his biggest budget. It only grossed 89 million, so it's
mm.
kind of a bomb. And it did not do very well on the critic side as well. 22% on Rotten Tomatoes critics, 47 audience score. Letterbox users gave this an average of 2.7. So, it's kind of mixed to negative reviews on this one. First I want to talk about who's involved here. Larry Fong is a director of photography who worked on this. He did 300 with Snyder. He also did Watchmen. Ended up doing BVS with him as well. So they've worked together a lot. He's got a really great eye. Composer Tyler Bates worked on this. He's worked on a
Mm-hmm.
number of films that I really enjoy. He's worked on many of Snyder's films as well, all the way back to his first movie, Dawn of the Dead, the remake from 2004. He did that. 300,
Mm-hmm.
Watchmen. He's gone on now to do John Wick and all kinds of other stuff. Editor William Hoy worked on this. I wanted to bring him up because editing is a big part of this movie.
Yeah.
And he also worked on 300 and Watchmen. He did the recent Batman movie as well. And so, you've got all these guys on the technical side that I just think are excellent. So, on the technical side of things, I think this movie fires on all cylinders. It's just super well shot, edited. Visual effects are great. Like the music a lot. Music plays a big role in the movie. I'll talk about in a moment. But yeah, critics weren't fans. There's quite a few scathing reviews I've got here. So I'll start with James Bernardinelli from Real Views. He says this movie isn't bad in the way some incompetently made movies are bad. This movie is bad because there's much skill evident in a pointless endeavor. So that was his thought on it. Going back to Mr. Travers, Peter Travers with Rolling Stone says, looks aren't everything. Case in point, Sucker Punch, a dazzling visual design that goes tone deaf every time it opens its dumb mouth or makes claims to profundity. So he wasn't a fan of the script. A.O. Scott with New York Times says there is nothing here to enjoy beyond the slight satisfaction in noting that the movie lives up to its name. Um, then we have Stephen Rea with the Philadelphia Inquirer. He says, hands down, the most nightmarishly awful film of the year. That was his summation.
Oh
Then we
boy.
have a guy named Roger Moore with the Orlando Sentinel,
Mm.
who says, this is the most epic miscalculation since the golden summer of M. Night Shyamalan, an unerotic, unthrilling, erotic thriller in the video game mold. Sucker Punch is the last airbender with bustiers.
Hey now. Yeah, they trying to say Last Airbender isn't a classic.
There you go. And then the last one I'll end with is Lisa Schwartzbaum with Entertainment Weekly, who said,
Oh yeah.
the well prepared moviegoer slips into his or her own private fantasy of a world in which movie effects are themselves locked away in an institution for the criminally insane until such a time as those effects are truly, really necessary for the story. So I'll disagree with her first. I just think that, the effects used in this are so necessary. I don't see how you could do this without them. And they actually make sense. Talking about this movie is kind of difficult because it's very layered. This is one
Yeah.
of those
Yeah.
movies that there's so much going on, there's so much
Mm-hmm.
under the surface, there's so many different ways to even interpret this film,
Mm-hmm.
which makes it to me one of the most interesting movies to talk about, but also a difficult one to talk about. This movie's about a young woman who's institutionalized for accidentally killing her younger sister, who was being assaulted by their stepfather. And as she goes into this asylum, she imagines it as a brothel, first of all. And so she's the dancer in this brothel. And then as she begins dancing, she goes into another fantasy, which is her as kind of like an action hero and all these
Mm-hmm.
different kind of wild scenarios, right? So there's multiple layers to it. And when they go to those fantasy realms that she's dancing, that's basically fully CGI environments,
Mm-hmm.
fully CGI action sequences
Right.
that I just think are awesome. But the other stuff, which is really most of the movie, there's really only four of those action sequences. And then so the rest of the film is really no effects. It's all
Mm-hmm.
practical. It's all on sets that they built. And so, yeah, I kind of disagree with that assessment of the effects not being necessary and being overdone. I think it's evident from the critics that this movie is just misunderstood, in my opinion. I don't think people really understand what's going on here. Again, it's one of these very layered, deep films, which I don't think people were used to with Snyder. First of all, he had done 300, very straightforward action film, right?
Right.
I mean that has some good themes to it, but it's not like a very deep movie. It's just like here's a cool action war film. And then Dawn of the Dead before that, it's a zombie apocalypse film. There's not much to it, right?
Was Watchmen before or after this one?
Watchmen was the movie he did right before this.
Yeah, because I thought
So
that was pretty confusing.
yeah, and that's another one where a lot's going on. It's a long
Yeah.
movie. There's a director's cut, which I think is better,
Oh, really?
which is
I didn't like
unfortunately,
Watchmen.
yeah, you didn't like it. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Watchmen. So this one is, I feel like, even more difficult to grasp because
Hmm.
it's really, again, from my view, there's so many ways to interpret it. So my view on it isn't even the only right view or anything, but it's a satire for me. He's actually satirizing the kind of roles of women in pop culture, right? So it's an ensemble cast. It's all these young women who are headlining the film. You've also got some great turns by Oscar Isaac in here, who I think is excellent in this. Scott Glenn shows up as well, and he's great. But it's really a movie that, as the title suggests, subverts expectations on what you think this movie's going to be. It's not exactly that. It's sort of a play on it in a way. There's so many interesting things, the very opening shot, it's opening logos on a curtain, right? On a stage, on a curtain. The curtain opens up and we see the set on the stage, which is a bedroom. And the main character Baby Doll is sitting on this set, on the stage. And so right from the beginning, he's saying, what you're seeing here isn't real. It's something that's being played out. And as it progresses, we get her in the asylum then, and there's, she's about to be lobotomized, and that's when it kind of switches into the brothel, and she's kind of imagining this now.
Hmm.
It's just one of these, again, very layered kind of movie that's difficult to explain.
Yeah.
It's difficult to even to grasp. I've seen this movie many times because I
Oh,
find it
really?
so interesting. I've watched the behind the scenes. There's a whole another one of those video commentaries. Snyder himself comes on
Oh.
screen and
Hmm.
kind of talks to you about it, and multiple interviews with the cast and things like this. But there's so many ways to look at it. On the surface, it's just a kind of fantasy action film, right? It's sort of a fantasy action movie with this kind of psychological storyline. You can see it as a very straightforward story about, Baby Doll kind of trying to escape this asylum she's in, through these imagined scenarios. There's ways of looking at it where there's a character named Sweet Pea, played by Abby Cornish. There's a way of looking at it where it's actually her story. And Baby Doll is a sort of persona that she's created in her mind, because we see several scenes in the movie that reflect Baby Doll's story. Emily Browning plays Baby Doll, and Sweet Pea's story. They both have
Mm.
sisters. They're both in this place. They're both escaping. There's even a scene where Sweet Pea is wearing the same outfit as Baby Doll. She has a blonde wig on, and they're kind of performing this lobotomy on her. And so there's all these things that kind of suggest that maybe it's this, maybe it's that. It's all open for interpretation. So that's what I find so compelling about it and interesting about it, that I think a lot of people, they were kind of maybe going in expecting a Zack Snyder action movie. And he gives you that, but he also kind of is saying there's something else at work here. There's something a little deeper that is going on with, how the media portrays women again, and different these different scenarios, objectifies them, portrays them in these certain ways. Again, a lot going on here. I could talk about it all day. I don't want to keep rambling, but I just think it's well done on every level. The music, I'll mention briefly. It's kind of the backbone of the film. It's a lot of these, songs that they're covering and that play into the story of Baby Doll and all these different characters, and sort of remixes of covers and things like that I think work
Hmm.
really well. All right, so trying to get my thoughts together on it. What are your thoughts on this one, Bert?
Yeah, I can see why you struggle. I mean, because it is very layered, and
Right.
it's one of those that, coming from the mind of someone that just like, it's almost like someone that throws paint onto a a canvas and you're not used to seeing it that way, so it's hard to describe.
Right.
I really wanted to like this film.
Mm,
There is a great deal of effort, obviously, and artistry involved.
yeah.
But ultimately, it's confusing, and multiple rewatches probably would help with that.
Yes.
But ultimately, it was just not that satisfying, unfortunately.
Right.
The fantasy sequences, the sort of the action scenes,
Hmm.
are creative, and the effects are really good. It just some of them carried on. I can't believe I'm saying this because I kind of like scenes that carry on, because sometimes a lot of action movies you'll get like 20 seconds of good action and then the scene's
Right.
over. But
Right.
in some cases with this, there was so much just like gunning down of like bad guys. It just kind of
Right.
felt like a video game.
Yeah.
And maybe that was for a reason, but
Yep.
I just was like numb after a while, like the countless people or robots that kept getting
Right.
knocked down. And again, sometimes in a creative fashion, and it was
Sure.
nice to look at.
Yeah.
I really like the visuals of the dragon sequence,
Yeah.
and the robots were pretty cool. So
Hmm.
a lot of style points.
Right.
But yeah, and then the scene, pretty much all the scenes involving the brothel just didn't
Hmm.
interest me at all. Like I
Yeah.
feel like they could have just cut that out entirely and
Mm.
just made it about a girl that had these fantasies about not being in the terrible place that she was in,
Right.
and then their action scenes. Like that to me would have been a little more understandable.
Right.
And so yeah, it was just not a very satisfying experience overall, unfortunately.
Gotcha.
I kind of feel it's like one of those, like you recognize the skill put into to pulling off a film like that, and
Yeah.
you kind of feel bad. But I mean,
Right.
honestly, I'm probably at like 2 stars on it, one and
Okay.
a half. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
unfortunately.
Gotcha. No, I mean, that's fine. That's totally fine.
It
Like I
was the
said, for
first
me,
two critics. I kind of agreed with
yeah.
the first two critics what they
Right.
said, but the ones that said it was like the worst film of the year or the worst since whatever. I mean, that's ludicrous.
Right. Right. Yeah. Just because of the skill involved, like you were mentioning, the technical wizardry behind not only the
Yes,
effects, but the camera work and choreographing the fight sequences and all that. There's so
right.
much goes into all that stuff that is really incredible.
But a
No,
lot
this
of
is,
directors, it would have
yeah.
been a mess. Like
Oh,
some,
sure.
lot of directors probably would have settled for mediocre CGI,
Yep.
because I mean that pulls a lot of weight,
Yep.
and the CGI in it's pretty good. I mean,
Yeah.
Zack Snyder really never has times where you're thinking, oh, that looks bad. Never,
Yeah.
So I mean,
Exactly.
that's why I'm up more like at 2 stars,
Sure.
because if the effects were bad, I mean, forget about it. I mean,
Sure.
I'd
Right.
probably like,
Right.
this is like almost unwatchable. But
Right, right. No, no, I totally see where you're coming from. I think rewatches help. I remember
mhm,
seeing this in the theater and just kind of being blown away by the visuals.
yeah,
Not being as into the story, maybe, but every rewatch, it just gets better and better
gotcha. Yeah.
because the layers are revealed slowly but surely. I was watching it with
Yeah,
my
right.
wife. She's
Hmm.
she's watched it once and she didn't want to rewatch it with me. I'm like, no, you just rewatch it and let's see if we can, I want to kind of decipher this because I was even
Yeah.
watching YouTube videos with guys, talking about it, and there's just so much here to discuss. And I think the brothel stuff, I get why that is maybe the stuff that is least interesting. But again, I think what is trying to be conveyed is the thing, where it's talking about, the asylum. It's sort of a
Oh, like a metaphor.
commentary. Well,
Yeah.
the asylum first is, I think, a commentary on. It all takes place during the '60s, so that whole thing was going on, where young women were
Right.
being institutionalized for
Uh-huh.
no reason, and so it's sort of a commentary on the way we think women's minds work, maybe,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then the brothel would be the way we objectify them, use them for their bodies, that kind of thing. And then, the
But
the
why is she
fantasy.
fantasizing about that?
Well, I don't know if she's necessarily fantasizing about it. I
I
think
mean,
it's
but it's
more
in
of
her mind, right? I mean,
I
she's the one living that sort of fantasy out.
I think it's more a coping
Strange choice.
mechanism where she's dealing with the trauma of this asylum she's in,
It just seems like a strange thing for her to use as a coping mechanism. You see what I'm saying? Like, I
right,
don't really
right,
get that. I get the action scenes because she's exacting revenge,
sure,
but as
sure,
escapism, I don't get a brothel. I don't know
yeah.
why Snyder decided on that.
I think it goes back to that idea of him wanting to play with that, objectifying them. And I think
Sure.
the
Yeah.
asylum, she probably is experiencing those things,
Hmm.
but maybe not in such a glamorized way, maybe.
Yeah.
Where in the brothel, they're talking more about they're just dancing for these men instead of in the asylum she's probably being actually assaulted. So maybe it's that.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't
Well,
know.
I can
Again, there's a lot
appreciate,
here.
yeah, and that's the thing. I can appreciate that. I'm glad when direct. I mean, we've got plenty of movies that are just very straight down the pipe, that are just,
Exactly.
you don't have to really think at all. I mean,
Correct.
Christopher Nolan never has a movie like that. I mean, his are
Right.
all very layered, and
Right.
he probably loses some audience because of that as well.
Sure.
But I mean, I do appreciate what he was trying to do. It
Yeah.
just ultimately is as art, it works, but as entertainment, not so much. I guess that's where
Gotcha,
I'm at on
gotcha.
this one.
Yeah, it is heavy too. That's the other thing is like it's not an easy movie to watch
Right,
because of
right,
these themes they're dealing with. There's a
sure,
lot of very intense, dark moments here. It's not an easy one to throw on and watch anytime
sure, right.
because of what he's dealing with. So yeah,
Yeah,
I really appreciate the movie. The more I watch it, the more I appreciate it
I could get that. Yeah.
because I think people do misconstrue it a lot. Unfortunately, I think he's even talked about how he kind of regrets how it was received because it was kind of taken as something that he didn't intend at all. He kind of intended the
Mm,
opposite. What he was trying to say. I think people took it as the opposite of what he was trying to do. They thought he was
hmm.
objectifying women in it and that kind of thing, and
So
commentary
that's what
on
I
that.
right. That was
Right.
my thing again when I said that I don't get why that's her escape is to have it be a brothel where you
Right.
know what I mean. But
Right.
I think he intended something else. Is kind of what it
Sure.
sounds like.
Right.
Yeah, and I
Right.
and I get that.
Yeah, and he's a thoughtful guy. I think he's also mischaracterized as kind of just like a bro who kind of just makes guy movies, and action, blow him up and crazy stuff. But
Gotcha.
I think under the surface of really all of his movies, especially Sucker Punch onward, I feel like there's always a very clear theme and idea that he's exploring
Hmm.
that's really interesting. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, I'm a fan. I give it 4.5 stars on my recent
Do ya?
rewatch, and
Okay. Wow.
yeah, because I just enjoy it so much and enjoy
Hmm.
revisiting it. It's one that I get a lot out of.
Well, I when the critics watch it once, they're gonna probably have the same take that I did. Some of
Right.
them were awfully harsh, even with that though.
I know.
Partly just because they want people to laugh at it or whatever.
Sure,
Probably,
sure. Right,
because
right.
it's not an awful movie. It's not the worst
Yeah,
movie since anything. I mean, it's technically very very. It could be you probably show off your home theater system with this movie, for instance.
definitely. It looks great. All right. Well, that was my last one I wanted to discuss. What is yours?
We're gonna take a little trip back before we even kicked off this podcast.
Yes.
You and I were talking, and I mentioned we talked about movies that were maybe divisive, and the one I pointed out was Dark Fate because on the Facebook
Right.
group, we batted this around a little bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, so my movie is Terminator 6, really, Dark Fate. I'll just refer
Or
to it as
or
Dark.
Terminator 3, depending on how you look at
Oh man, yeah,
it.
true. Yeah, which refers to the fact that this could be part three if you throw out the actual part 3, 4, 5.
Exactly.
Right. True. So rather than giving kind of a review per se of sort of like description of the story and all that, I'm just gonna just give some commentary on it, and I'll start with Sarah Connor, played by Linda Hamilton again here for the third time, which is why it could be the third film.
Right.
And Dark Fate takes everything that I would want Sarah Connor to be up to at age 65 and brings it to glorious light here. She's hilarious, she's poignant at times, and she is badass. I mean, in significant ways in all three with all three of those things. Do I care that and obviously spoilers for this.
Right.
Do I care that
Yeah.
John Connor dies at the beginning? No, I don't care. This is a different timeline. After 5 movies about John Connor and 2 seasons of television about John Connor, and I love all of that except for the future one, Salvation. And I love all of that. We've had enough though of John Connor. So and it's funny because Edward Furlong that plays John Connor in T2 is quoted as saying that he doesn't think people will like the fact that John Connor's killed off. Of course, he's going to say that. That's his part, right? But the fact is, as long as there's a satisfying story in front of me on the screen, I don't care. I don't care really about. It's just like when I watch any other movie or Game of Thrones season 1. I'm not going to spoil this because I don't think you've seen it, and it's a huge spoiler. A major character dies, and I literally turned it off and said I'm not watching this show ever again And the next day I
Wow.
turned it back on, thankfully, and I did continue watching because it's a great show. And other major characters die off, but the fact is, Terminator's not an exception. Like it shouldn't be like John Connor is everything, and if he's gone, there is no show. I mean, how about the movie in front of us? Is it a quality movie? Then there we go. So that's the way I look at it.
Sure.
Um, and in this movie, you've got Mackenzie Davis. She's like this modified human. She's like a new addition to the franchise, like this new type of android, I guess you could call her. And,
Right.
and she's really cool. And she has a lot of emotion she has to go through too. And she's wonderfully played by Mackenzie Davis. And so I thought that was a great new addition. Another new addition to the series is this sort of separatable exoskeleton that the Terminator can leave it behind to like drive a car while he's out doing other stuff. And that's so strange and awesome and inventive. And it seems like a logical graduation from prior Terminator things that we've seen in the past. I don't really understand how it works, but that's the thing is that it puts me right in the position of the main cast. Like they're like, what is this coming after us? And they don't really understand how it works either. It's great. And then where they had Arnold at with his character, I thought, I mean, it's a bit jarring at first, but I really liked it. It was so extreme from going from what we saw in T2 and then the very beginning of Dark Fate to where he is when we meet him again in the I guess the middle of Dark Fate. I thought that was really neat. And again, I'm a huge fan of this series. So I don't really, and I know a lot of the critics are fans and they hated like all this stuff that I'm talking about. And I don't know
Right.
why. So
Right.
before I give a couple quotes, tell me how much you like Dark Fate.
Yeah, so yeah, like you said, we've hashed this out a little bit before. By far my least favorite Terminator film. Honestly, one of my least favorite films.
Of
I
all
think I
time?
yeah, I think I have it at maybe one
Wow.
star, might be half a star. I don't know. I get basically no enjoyment out of this at all.
Really?
And it
And you
goes
do you
back.
like so you like the other films though?
T1 and T2, perfect movies. Two of my
Oh, okay. So
all-time
you do like
favorite,
those.
two of my all-time favorite films. T2, probably in my top 20 favorite movies ever made. T3, I think, fell way off. I give that one maybe 2 stars, 2.5 at the most. Not great.
I
Salvation, I really like. Salvation, I'm a huge fan
did you.
of because Salvation finally tries something different. It's all, to me, it's a prequel. I guess you could look at it as a far in the future sequel, but it's no time travel involved. It's all in the future. It's all post Judgment Day. I thought Christian Bale was great in
Right.
it. I liked the all of it. I thought it was really well done. Genesis is basically unwatchable. I think it's such a mess. I don't understand
Mm.
anything that's going on in that movie. I don't think the screenwriters do either. It's just a mess. It's just it doesn't make any sense at all. Totally, they
Gotcha.
tried. It was an attempt at a reboot. They totally recast all the characters, and none of it worked for me. I didn't like that one at all either.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Genesis and Dark Fate are basically on the same level for me, where it's
Mm.
them trying to continue a franchise that died a long time ago. To me, T2 is such a perfect ending that to try to continue it is just it doesn't work. Everything that they've tried, T3, tried to do an older John Connor years later. This one they just kill him, like you said. It's kind of reminds me of Aliens and Alien 3,
Oh
where
yeah.
they have the aliens, and T2 is all about saving this young child. And okay, we rescued the kid, we saved the day, the end. The beginning of the next movie, the kid's dead. And it's like, well, wait a second. The whole franchise up until this point has been about protecting this person. T2, they stopped Judgment Day. That's what that whole movie's about. That's why it's called Judgment Day. They prevented it from happening. The future is now what they're going to make of it. No fate but what we make. That's what the whole franchise is about. And this movie is like, nope, nope, it still is going to happen, but it's not Skynet. It's whatever it's called. I forget the name of it, but it's some whole new
Right.
thing. And it's like, it's just to me grasping at straws to keep a franchise alive. Whatever we can do to just make more
Yeah.
money off of this popular title, and it just totally falls flat. You mentioned the cast. I don't think they're bad, but I just find these characters so unlikable.
Oh really?
Yeah, I don't enjoy watching any of these people on screen. As cool as they are, they do some cool stuff. They've got some
Yeah.
one-liners, but I didn't buy into the relationships. I felt like Grace, Mackenzie Davis's character, just was so abrasive in how she dealt with Sarah Connor and everybody. Like, I didn't get why she was so against these people that are trying to help her. Yeah, Linda Hamilton, she's fine, but I felt like she didn't get back into the role fully. I feel like there was some kind
Really?
of disconnect. I don't know. I just didn't feel like she was the same character. I don't know. It just didn't quite work. And then Arnold, throwing him in there, I felt like he was an afterthought. Like, how are we gonna push Arnold in here somehow? Well, I don't know. Let's make him I don't know. He's like a carpenter or something. He does drapes or something. It's just the most bizarre, off the wall choice. I feel like they had all these note cards up of like, what could Arnold be doing? And they picked the most random one they could, just kind of with a blindfold. So just bizarre choices. I felt that just did not work for me. His whole relationship with this woman that he's living with is so. How does that work? I don't even get how she hasn't found out that he's a Terminator, been living with for like 20 years. So just odd decisions, leaps in logic that don't totally work for me. The CGI I felt like is usually on point until like certain moments where it's way overdone, like especially towards the end of the film. We're talking about how, bad
Like around the
CGI
dam.
is, yeah,
The,
bad CGI is
yeah.
hidden by nighttime. And I felt
Yeah.
that's what they did here.
Yeah.
Like it's all nighttime. It's
There
them
are a couple moments.
these
Yeah.
crazy going out of the airplane sequence. I felt
Yep.
like it was
I know what you mean.
way over the top and way overdone. All the stuff down in the water was weird. The whole finale just kind of lost momentum for me and fell apart. It's just a movie that I don't get any enjoyment out of. I'm probably a little more into the canon. I want it to continue. If it's going to continue, it needs to make sense and it needs to respect what's come before. Whereas you maybe are a little more into just give me a good movie.
Exactly.
And so that might be a part of my hang up. But yeah, just overall, I feel like from the script to the performances, outside of that highway action scene, I felt the other ones were a little redundant and just kind of messy. So yeah, I don't get a lot out of this one. It's not one that I enjoy.
I've seen a lot of action movies where I would say the film itself was kind of garbage, but at least the action was interesting. And
Sure.
I feel like, and you said you felt it was kind of redundant and boring. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know why. For some reason, when I see the fighting in this, it feels really creative, and I
Mm,
feel like they just throw down just time
mm,
after time with each action scene. But
yeah.
I've read that criticism too, that the action
Yeah.
scenes are redundant. The
Hmm.
Terminator never stops coming. Well, it's a Terminator movie.
Right. Yeah. And that's the problem too, is that we've seen six of these now.
Yeah.
And so I feel like, that was part of my problem with the third one. It's like he time travels back to protect John Connor from this bigger, badder Terminator again. It's like, it just feels like such a rehash of everything we've seen before. Whereas
Mm.
Terminator Salvation, like I said, I like that movie. I don't think it's a perfect movie. It's got problems, but I think that it's at least a cool idea. Like, hey, let's go post Judgment Day. Let's go way in the future, and we'll have John Connor fighting these machines with the Resistance. We've seen
Hmm.
glimpses of that, but we haven't really seen a movie
Yeah.
about that. So I
Right.
felt that was interesting and an interesting way in. That really, to me, should have been a whole new trilogy of movies that kind of could have tied back into the original movie, and so you'd have kind of had this time loop. But they decided
Hmm.
to keep doing these, again, I think T2 was just such a big hit. Everyone loved that
Yeah.
they're like, let's go and do that again and try to replicate that success. And they've never been able to do it.
Yeah. I think you hit on something there, because most people that hate T3 also hate Dark Fate,
Yeah.
because it's the same kind of thing. It's like,
Right.
well, what if they sent a bigger and better Terminator,
Right.
Terminator that did something different? And I could watch 10 of those movies. And I think
Sure.
you and a lot of other people are like, no, we've had enough of it. I mean, I guess
Right.
that's for based on an individual preference. Let me read a
Right.
couple quotes here real quick.
Sure. Go for it.
This is Christy Lemire. She operates the Roger Ebert website, so she still does reviews. I don't know, it might be more than one person that's on that site, but anyway,
Yeah.
he says Dark Fate recycles images, visual effects, and even dialogue from the previous movies, including lines that have been uttered so many times in so many other pop culture contexts that they now elicit groans within the confines of an actual Terminator setting. Sure, it's great to see Linda Hamilton back, swaggering and kicking ass in the defining role of her career, but now she's the one who gets to say, I'll be back. And then she says, it's hilarious, as well as some other painfully clunky lines like, I hunt Terminators and I drink till I black out. I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know if she was sarcastic about it's hilarious, because she just admitted that it was funny. So I don't really see the problem. I mean, like,
Right.
there are some funny lines in this movie. She
Right.
says, Hamilton deserves better. So do the other strong women who make up the film's trio of warriors fighting to protect each other and all of humanity from technological destruction. I don't know why she says they deserve better. They're literally the heroes of the film and are saving the world.
Right.
So I don't get it. It doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
The
She might
first
be
big
referring
fight
to the
scene,
dialogue again. I don't know. I'm not
maybe.
sure.
Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah.
Maybe so. Oh, Hamilton looks fierce as ever, but she's stuck explaining things to her fellow female cohorts through inane expository dialogue that's haranguing and blasé. Well, I thought the dialogue was great, but I mean, you didn't
Okay.
like it that much. I think
Yeah,
it
I didn't
sounds
care
like
for that. Yeah.
I thought it was exactly where I wanted her to be at this age.
Mm,
She's been through things crazier than anybody on the planet.
right.
She's like cantankerous. She's like up for the fight. She's got the weapons. I mean,
Hmm.
I thought it was great. And she writes, and it's depressing to end the film with these ladies in the position of needing rescue from a man, even if it is an android, when they were just doing fine on their own. Thank you very much. I mean, I don't know if she wants no men in the film. I mean, I
Right.
can't really win with this reviewer. The ladies
Right.
are the stars. They team up.
Sure.
There's one dude there that helps them out.
Right.
Like chill,
Yeah.
is
Right.
how I feel with that. But
Sure.
that was one person.
Yeah.
Chris Stuckman that I referred to before.
Hmm.
He gives it a C, but he really doesn't want to. I
Yeah.
think he hates it, but he knows
Yeah.
that it's got some
Some merit.
legitimacy
Yeah.
to it. He
Right.
feels that it dishonors T1 and T2. It's confusing because he complains that it's the same plot as T2, but that it dishonors it. So I don't really get how is that dishonoring it if it's the same.
If
And
you
I don't know if
do
you
it
can
but
have it
do it
both
poorly,
ways.
maybe. I think that's how kind of I feel too, because it does have
Yeah,
similarities. I mean,
yeah, it
they
does.
changed
It
it
does.
enough. They changed it enough to make it different, but yeah, I think he probably means that it's just the same thing but not as good, maybe.
Maybe so.
Yeah.
He says everything about the script is bad. Yet then he goes on to admit liking the main characters, loving
Right.
seeing Linda Hamilton back, laughing at some lines, Arnold having some great lines. So that doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense because
Right, right. Yeah.
he doesn't like that John Connor dies at the beginning after the audience went through all of that they did with him in T2. But
Right.
again, this is not the first film series to kill off a main character.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
true.
and
It's true.
and would he prefer a recycled plot? Like, is it better? I mean, I think you would probably say just don't make the movie at all. But
Yeah.
it wouldn't be better to have yet another John Connor story at this point, right? I mean, that would really be rehashing it.
Correct. Yeah.
And so
Which is
I don't
what
know.
T3 did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
He says the timeline is messed up. He says it's really hard to get things right with time travel movies. Right. I mean, Back to the Future, even I would say is probably, I think, the best time travel movie ever. And I could
Yeah.
criticize how it's not possible, how they did things in that. But
Sure.
again, you either accept that going into a time travel movie or you don't.
Right.
So I don't
Exactly.
get that criticism. This is interesting. He says the Terminator feels bad about killing John, and that doesn't make sense. Well, it's artificial intelligence, right? He's not programmed for every circumstance. He's
Right.
programmed to observe humanity and adapt. We learned that in
Right.
T2.
Yes.
John Connor is teaching him. He's literally
Yeah.
teaching him.
Yeah.
So I don't understand why it doesn't make sense that he wouldn't adapt now that he's moved on after fulfilling his mission.
Right. Yeah. That
So
totally made sense to me.
yeah, I mean, it was out of the blue, but it made
Right.
sense, and I enjoyed it.
Sure.
And this is the last thing he says. Nothing about it feels dangerous. I really don't get that one. A major
Mm,
character dies in the first scene.
right.
Lead character Danny is her name. Her father and brother die early on from a new
Right.
Terminator they know nothing about.
Yeah.
The action scenes, like I said, they throw down time after time.
Yeah.
There's loads of intensity. I guess that's
Mhm.
subjective, but he didn't even feel it felt dangerous. So
Yeah. Yeah. I only get him on that level when it comes to, like I mentioned, the CGI getting just too out of control at the end of the movie.
yeah, there's a couple moments where it does. Yeah,
I feel
that's
like
true.
it, and it feels fake, and it just feels like, they can survive a giant plane crash, then they can survive anything. So
Yeah, they just
that's
try to do a little bit too much with it. Yeah, I mean,
right.
I get
Right.
that as a criticism
Sure.
for a
Sure.
couple moments in the film. Yeah.
Yeah.
So otherwise, it's completely defensible.
Sure.
Some people
Sure.
just don't want more of that kind of Terminator. I
Right.
do. Like I said, I could watch 10 more movies like that. I think it was about my favorite movie of the year it came out.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. My least favorite. So bottom of
Yeah,
my list,
clearly.
top of yours list. Again,
Awesome.
that's it's exactly sums up what we're talking about here, which I
Mhm.
think is such an interesting topic of the subjectivity of art and how it lands with us, what we're looking for. Has a lot to do with it, kind of what we enjoy in the first place. And I'm glad we mentioned expectations. Because that's another big thing going into any
Sure.
movie. You're kind of expecting one thing. With M. Night, you're kind of expecting this kind of intense thriller. And when he delivers kind of a slower, more romantic thing, it's maybe going to be hit different with you, you know. When Zack Snyder tries to go all existential on us, you know, we kind of get a little bummed out maybe. And
Right.
then, you know, when we try to, you know, do these different things, it just can land different. So yeah, I think they think this was such a great discussion. I'm so glad you came up with this topic.
It was,
And
yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
all right, well, that will do it for our discussion on defending bad movies. Let us know which bad movies you like in the comments below. Let us know what you think of the movies that we discussed as well. We'd love to have a conversation with you down there in the comments. Also, all of our social media links are in the description below. Be sure to follow us there. Share this on social media. We greatly appreciate it. We want to get as many eyes and ears on this as possible. Thanks again, Bert, for joining me.
Yeah, you bet. This was a good one.
Yeah, it was. It was a great idea. Glad you mentioned it. So, hope you guys enjoyed it as much as we did. We will see you next time right here on The Real World.